Hello, friends. Welcome. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name's Aubri Devashrayee. Alright, it's Wednesday. I've said this before, but sometimes I feel like Wednesdays are worse than Mondays. Especially at the beginning of the day, where it's like, we still have half of the week left. That shows my perspective. The half week full. That was a dumb joke of me trying to say half glass full. Okay. Today, I want to talk about Sudan, what's happening there. I saw Zateo came out with a video that I want to watch. I have been giving updates periodically about the genocide that's going on there, as well as in the Congo and in Palestine. But it is nice to hear from these people that have lived experience that they are talking about it. At Zateo, they get some great people to interview, so I want to check that out. I saw that Zoran Mamdani came out with a video today saying, "Happy Tax Day in New York, we're taxing the rich." So I'm very intrigued what he's going to say there. It's probably going to be a lot of the same kind of talking points, but to be this outspoken consistently about taxing the rich is extremely important, especially with putting pressure on the governor to actually want to tax the rich, which she has promised to help with 2K, rolling out 2K, that is universal child care for 2-year-olds. And that will require increasing taxes on the wealthy and corporations. So she's already feeling a lot of pressure, and especially with how everything is going with the state of the world and the country, I think she is going to increasingly be feeling this more and more, and that's good. Because what's happening in New York City, we have to be clear, is pretty exceptional when it comes to living under American capitalism, that we actually have someone who is willing to adopt progressive tax policies in addition to progressive social and civil policies, just progressive policies all around. And it's really good for us to see because it demonstrates how there is such little political will when it comes to most of our representatives, and how they are not very likely to act in a manner that is helpful and beneficial to their constituents, where when they are bought by these private interests, these billionaires, their donors, lobbyists, that they try to make it look like it is impossible to actually have livable circumstances. And we have seen with Zoran Mamdani that good things can actually be done. People can actually have their needs be addressed. And this is what leads to revolution. We've talked about this before, but once we see what can be done, this is consistent with a lot of revolutionary movements, that when people have been oppressed for such a long time, that once they feel a little less pressure and they realize what can be, that's when people rise up even more. And there is a reason why there were all of these billionaires, probably all over the globe, that were fighting to make it so that he would lose the election. There was so much money dumped in the campaign, the Cuomo campaign against him, with all of these smears, just overt racism and Islamophobia. And this is why they didn't want him to win, because they did not want the world to see what is possible, because that means their power is waning. They don't have as much control over the narrative, and that people will understand how deeply unfair the world is and that it doesn't have to be that way. So anyway, we did also get an update with the Senate refusing to pass this war powers resolution. This is expected. I was expecting this because of how many of them are bought and sold by Zionist lobbies. This is very clear. You can look up their donors, and I encourage everyone who is wondering why their representative is voting a particular way to look up who is donating to them. That will explain it. That's it. That's just it. It's not more interesting than that, and I wish it was. They're also these complete bootlickers, ass kissers of Donald Trump, and they are very happy to be supporting this fascist agenda, this imperialist violence that they not only are supporting, or they are acting in behalf of these Zionist donors, but also that they have many donors from the industrial war complex. So they are enriching themselves and the people that they are loyal to, rather than, making circumstances more livable for their constituents. Why would they ever do that? Why would they ever do that? Get in power and actually listen to the people who put them in power. Well, we know that with these lobbies and all this money that they do contribute to them being in power, so that sarcasm doesn't really work, but yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that. It is a bleak state of affairs in the world, but we do have some good things happening. We do have some humor. We do have some funny things happening. Mostly concerning all of this hysteria around Trump posting about him being Jesus. It's hilarious to see the fallout. We did see Josh Johnson. He's a comedian that I love. He also is a co-host on The Daily Show, and he is excellent. He consistently is doing new sets for his stand-up every single week. He writes new material, and it is in relation to current events that he does this, or politics, and he ties in these anecdotes that he then wraps in to the narrative. It's just genius. He's a genius. So I saw that he came out with his longest special yet. It is an hour and a half. That will honestly take up most of today. So I want to try to budget enough time for all this, but I'm not always the best at this because I pause things and then jabber on about my thoughts. There is this video that I saw of Arundhati Roy. She is an Indian writer, and she's incredible. I love her. Her writing is amazing and profound. She is revolutionary and extremely outspoken throughout her entire life for human dignity and rights. And there is a video from Democracy Now! 6 years ago of her talking about the danger of the US attacking Iran. And this is very relevant to today. And it will be like we are looking at someone predicting the future, but this is what happens when you have smart people who are observing things, actually speaking their mind and having a moral backbone, that they tend to be right about a lot of things. It makes it seem like they're clairvoyant, but in reality, they're paying attention. Maybe a little bit of clairvoyance as well. She also talks about Kashmir, and I want to talk about Kashmir more because I am learning even more about the complex history there, so I'll take you on that journey with me. I did see this interview that I wanted to watch by Nawal El-Saadawi. She is an Egyptian revolutionary. She's going to be talking about feminism, fiction, and the illusion of democracy, which is something that we talk about here quite a bit on this stream. So after that, we'll read a little bit more Rousseau, get into the Scarlet Pimpernel. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to all of this today. I don't know why I don't like do math in my head and try to figure out what I can. That is a weakness of mine. That's a fault of mine. I need to be better about that, of like budgeting my time better. But I get very excited and overly ambitious of what I can accomplish. This is a theme with me that I'm working on. Work in progress. Okay, so I did want to start off with this video about Sudan, and normally I start off with a humorous video to lighten up the heavy content and subject matter that we often discuss here. But since we have some comedy baked into these other things that I want to be discussing, namely the Josh Johnson set talking about the MAGA civil war, especially in relation to Iran. So we'll get to that as we go along. So we're going to start into some heavy stuff from the beginning, just as a warning. This is called Who is Viewing Sudan's Genocide? Experts point to the UAE and more. The United Arab Emirates, in case that's not clear. So let's give this a watch.
People don't see Sudan as a priority. There's no peace process to speak of.
The human tragedy is the one thing that I'm always amazed that it doesn't get more coverage. 12 million people being displaced is an astronomically high number. There's no rules of engagement. There's no accountability.
Do you think the United States government has leverage over the UAE here and that the UAE plays a crucial role in this genocide?
Sudan's war is tied up with so much of what's also happening in the Middle East.
It's basically Sudanese trying to fend for themselves.
It doesn't do us any good because we have so few people on the ground anymore.
This month marks 3 years since the start of the war in Sudan, a war which has not only created the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now, but where yet another genocide is taking place, one no one seems to be talking about here in the West. And now increased drone warfare is having dire consequences for Sudanese civilians. Not only are they being killed by direct strikes, but strikes, especially from the RSF militia, are also hitting the healthcare system and preventing desperately needed aid from being dispersed. For the latest on this devastating situation in Sudan, I'm joined by Musa Baba, an analyst and consultant for AIM Network, a frontline media organization providing news, investigative reports, and on-the-ground content from Sudan, and Susan Page, who served as the first US ambassador to the Republic of South Sudan under President Obama. Ambassador Page previously served as senior advisor to the special envoy for Sudan and South Sudan and was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs before being posted as an ambassador to the region. Thank you both for joining me on Mehdi Unfiltered. So much, sadly, to talk about. Mossab, let's start with you. Your organization reports from the front lines of this war, this genocide. What is the latest from the quote-unquote front lines? What is the situation on the ground right now?
Thank you for having me, Mahdi. The situation is basically there's been a stalemate for a long time right now. You know, the battle lines that have been drawn in the beginning of the war until now haven't changed that much, except for the capital Khartoum and unfortunately the RSF kind of gaining ground in other parts of the country, like in Blue Nile, taking over places like West Kordofan. So the nature of the war itself, you know, the problem is this isn't like the wars of the past, where in the past it was more liberation movements who had a cause and they were actually fighting for the people. But unfortunately, right now we have two parts of the Bashir regime. Most people feel safer, of course, under the SAF areas.
These are the Sudanese armed forces.
Yes, Sudan's armed forces led by General Burhan. And on the other side, you have, of course, the RSF led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. And basically, the RSF is kind of a creation. These are both kind of creations of the Bashir regime. And the RSF was kind of their weapon to quell the rebellions in other parts of Sudan. So the RSF, you know, by the mid-2010s kind of became a country on its own, became a government within a government, with a lot of resources and, claiming mining lands like gold mining, concessions, livestock, but most importantly, the illicit trade, like cross-border trade between Sudan and like the Sahel region primarily. So the war started in 2023, and it took unfortunately, an ethnic, nature to it, where the same kind of Janjaweed element that Bashir was using is now turned on.
Yes.
Khartoum. Go ahead.
I was going to bring Susan in and ask Susan, given how bad the situation is, as Mossab's describing, and given the political realities on the ground, it's not as if we don't know this stuff, right? Like, the RSF name is now known, even in the West. We are seeing reporting, not as much reporting as we would like, but reporting in The Guardian, in the New York Times, and the BBC about what's happening in places like El Fasher. We're hearing words like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and yet nothing happens, not in Western capitals. Washington, D.C., where I'm based, no one really talks about Sudan. No one is pressuring the administration or Congress to do anything.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Liking this video?
Yeah, this invisibilization, where, especially when it comes to Black lives that this is happening to, that there is a lot of disinterest in wanting to talk about this. This is the same concept for the Congo. And arguably, it's talked about even less, even though the humanitarian crisis in Sudan is worse. It just means that clearly there is still very much anti-Black sentiments throughout the entire world, but especially in the Western world, and how they fund these genocides, how these tech oligarchs are to blame particularly for what's happening in the Congo, and how there is this complete disinterest in wanting to discuss things. But actually talking about this is very important to highlighting the issues and making it so that more people are aware of it. So even though, again, like, this subject matter is heavy, like, it's not as bad as actually going through the circumstances that these people are experiencing.
And don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yes, and first of all, I also want to say thank you very much for inviting me onto your program. But you're exactly right. It's as if, to go back to what Mossab said, it's kind of like people don't see Sudan as a priority. Unfortunately, Sudan's war is tied up with so much of what's also happening in the Middle East. Maybe not directly, but quite indirectly, because you have many of the same players that are financing parts of the war, either directly with money, or with mercenaries, or with equipment, and providing those outlets for that gold trade, for the cross-border, for agriculture, all of these resources. And so you have players like the UAE, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Iran, you have Turkey, you have the UAE, you have just all of these different players. And then you have the Red Sea component versus the Nile waters component. So then that brings in Ethiopia and Eritrea and Egypt, of course, and South Sudan. Kenya is, I mean, it's all over. And I think that as countries also pull back their diplomats from areas that have been under long-standing contentious conflict, it doesn't do us any good, because we have so few people on the ground anymore. Through our diplomatic corps. And with the war, you have even fewer people, because it's left to some humanitarians. And the Sudanese population is doing all of that humanitarian work that in the past had at least been partly shouldered by the international community. But there's no peace process to speak of. There's little activity that seems to be talked about beyond the horrors for the population.
Mossad, before the massacre in El Fasher, the activists on the ground, humanitarian workers, had sounded the alarm for months in that RSF besieged city in Sudan. The Guardian newspaper recently reported that the UK and US governments discarded or buried reports that predicted genocide and that would have triggered intervention. What alarm bells are people on the ground sounding today, Mossad?
Well, today it's more dispersed. You know, in the beginning of the war, there was the ethnic cleansing that happened in Guinea, in West Darfur. And then that was the main reason why people were warning about Al-Fashir. And because they were enclosed, you know, the Al-Fashir was in an area that was completely surrounded by the RSF, as was Guinea. So now you have a couple of hotspots. You know, you have Delenj and Kadugli in South Kordofan. You have a Damazin in Blue Nile. Blue Nile state is on the border with Ethiopia. Like the Grand Renaissance Dam and all these things are right across the border. So that's also another, hotspot where there's a lot of warnings about what can happen, because Damazin, Kadugli, Delenj, these are all big cities, you know, comparatively, you know, to the region. And any, you know, invasion by the RSF would be horrific. You know, the only thing, you know, they have the SPLM North right now allied with them. So there won't be, hopefully, that ethnic cleansing that happened in the Guinea and Al-Fashir. But it's still not a good situation. Al-Ubayd also in North Kordofan is another place where there's a lot of warnings and it's been besieged for a long time. So unfortunately, now you have multiple areas that are an emergency.
Mossad, talk to us about the healthcare situation that I mentioned in the introduction, because the RSF has been carrying out drone strikes against healthcare facilities in White Nile State in Western Darfur. According to the WHO, 82% of global deaths from attacks against healthcare facilities occurred in Sudan, not in Gaza, in 2025, in Sudan. What does this mean for the 21 million people in Sudan who are believed to urgently need access to healthcare?
The human tragedy is the one thing that I'm always amazed that it doesn't get more coverage. I mean, 12 million people being displaced is an astronomically high number, you know, for any country and any population to go through. But add to that the breakdown of the state. You know, that's why I was, you know, in the very beginning, it's a complete state breakdown. You know, two parts of the government broke off and are fighting each other. And there's no rules of engagement. There's no accountability. There's nothing. Add to that what you said earlier, which affects the healthcare workers specifically, is the drone warfare. Because, you know, it's not like it was back in the days where you had some hound launchers and things like that on the ground and that have to be administered, and, you know, a lot of movement of ground forces. Now, like, you know, the RSF is getting whatever it wants from the UAE. You know, even Hemeti himself was saying in a recent speech that he had that, I get mercenaries from Colombia to operate my drones. You know, so does Burhan. You know, whataboutism within war. So unfortunately, that changed things significantly. These attacks in White Nile, you know, even SAF, unfortunately, blew up a hospital in East Darfur in Al-Dain. And these things, just there's no accountability mechanism. There's no regional engagement with this. There's, of course, the international community has receded in recent years. So it's basically Sudanese trying to fend for themselves. And like Susan said earlier, the problem is this is a regional war. It's not just a war among Sudanese. The money, the resources, the trade relations, all of that stuff is going through, you know, the UAE, Egypt. You know, it's no surprise that Sudan was pressured to join the Abraham Accords in a fragile transitional period where we had so many priorities. And then, you know, it was the first Trump regime, but, you know, the Biden regime wasn't any better. And, so, you know, the war kind of started under the Biden regime itself. So that's the problem. The Sudanese people are facing multiple adversaries, you know, local and regional.
So on that note about the regional adversaries, Susan, we had a guest on this show last time we covered Sudan from the Yale University Humanitarian Lab, who said very bluntly that the United States government could end this war tomorrow with a single phone call to Dubai with a single threat of sanctions on duty-free products at Dubai airport. Do you agree with that? Do you think the United States government has leverage over the UAE here and that the UAE plays a crucial role in this genocide?
I definitely think the UAE plays a very crucial role. And I mean, everyone knows it's, an open secret that that's where the money is going. That's where the gold trade is. And that's been longstanding. I mean, Hemedti has had these relations for a long time. I don't think that the U.S. has that much leverage, because even if we acted alone against, yes, global sanctions perhaps on goods and whatnot going through Dubai, but because of so many countries that are involved, just having sanctions on one country or one export leaves all of these other countries out of the picture. And so we can't just act on one. We would have to also coordinate that with others. And the US has relations with the UAE that are separate from what they're doing in Sudan. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. And if you have both the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Egypt all trying to supposedly conduct negotiations to end the war, they all have really significant interests.
Yes.
And so
on that,
out one leg.
On that note, Susan, the Trump administration is planning to present a supposed comprehensive peace plan for Sudan to the recently formed Board of Peace. I hate saying that name. Masad Boulos, the US senior advisor for Arab and African affairs, also father-in-law to Tiffany Trump, said that this plan is intended to build political momentum. The quote Quad, which is comprised of United States, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, has reportedly accepted this peace plan, Susan, that we haven't yet seen. But what does this level of involvement from the Trump administration mean for Sudan? Who gets to speak for Sudan if it's the US and CC and MBS and MBZ?
Right. This is the problem. When we had the revolution in 2019, that revolution was led by the people, who also, of course, suffered under the gunfire that they came under by the same two people that are fighting right now. And those people have been left out. The population has been left out, and we are constantly, this is not unique under this administration, unfortunately, but we always go straight to the fighters. And we understand that obviously to a certain extent. We want them to put down their weapons, but who does speak for the population? It's not these two, and it's not their allies. They don't care about the population. They're in this fight to stay in power and to have resources for themselves. They're not concerned about the bombings that they've done. So anything that does not involve a wider spectrum of the population of Sudan, and there are a number of groups. We have the Sudanese kitchens, all these groups that have been providing assistance on the ground under different names that have evolved. They need to be part of the story.
Yeah. Let me bring Mossab back in. Mossab, the war in Iran, which has seen Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which Susan mentioned, being hit by Iranian rockets. They've got their own problems right now at home for the first time. What impact has the war in Iran had on the genocide in Sudan? Has there been a knock-on effect, Mossab?
Well, so far there hasn't been anything. It's just kind of political maneuvering and statements and, Sudanese, the political class, trying to be politically correct. But to tell you the truth, like on the ground, most of the people who've felt the brunt of the RSF
visiting right now
are kind of like, anything that withholds the UAE from supporting the RSF, we'll take it. Now, that doesn't solve the whole problem of the war, of course, but at least the ethnic cleansing and the genocide that's happened, because unfortunately, what we've seen in the past couple of years is that Washington is pretty much captured by the UAE and, of course, by Israel. So that alliance right there, when Sheikh Tahnoun goes to Trump and then drops like $2 billion investments and it is
Yes.
cryptocurrency and stuff like that. It's impossible for any kind of solution to come from that side,
Yes,
or
well said.
from Musad Bolis or any of this stuff. So until now, we haven't seen any changes on the ground as a result of what's going on right now. But it's moving Sudanese towards local domestic solutions among Sudanese themselves. You know, the issue of truth and reconciliation, the issue of transitional justice, the issue of trying to mend the relationship among Sudanese themselves and come to a solution that would actually, you know, work for a lot of Sudanese. Now, there aren't any big mechanisms that are happening actually addressing this and, you know, convening people together from different political classes, armed movements, and, you know, even local traditional leadership and stuff like that. But that is the direction that it's going in because, you know, the era of the UN or, you know, the Troika or any of these groups coming with any kind of reasonable solution for Sudan is definitely not going to happen in the foreseeable future. So it's you know, there are some conversations. You know, Burhan is trying to change the makeup of Port Sudan. There are some initiatives, a lot of political initiatives, civil society initiatives that are going in that direction. So it's kind of like for us as Sudanese, we're trying to kind of, you know, encourage that more because initially it was supposed to be the responsibility of the African Union to convene these people so that then we can talk about, you know, even things like peacekeeping. We don't need external peacekeepers. There's millions of Sudanese who haven't joined this war or have joined just to protect their areas. So there is a formula of getting to a local peacekeeping and local reconciliation process.
Susan, last question to you. Back in the 2000s, early 2000s, people in the US were actually paying a lot of attention to Sudan. You had celebrities like George Clooney bringing the Darfur crisis front and center on the world stage. Why has Sudan not gotten that level of attention that it deserves this time around?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. One is that the world's attention is just in so many different places right now. And the other thing is it's just not in the news. It's Africa.
Yeah.
And people have just written it off as so often is the case.
These sentiments of anti-Blackness, but also how these algorithms that are controlled by these billionaires who are invested in this kind of genocidal violence for their own means and for their own ends, that they are refusing to elevate this kind of stuff.
The Middle East sucks a lot of attention out of anything else, and you know, rightfully also Gaza, what's going on there, and the attention span of a lot of people who are worried about what's happening at home. I do think, however, that as Musab says, there are a lot of people on the ground and
the Congo
even
flag
in the diaspora that are working really hard with different organizations on the ground locally to try to build some kind of community. I wouldn't necessarily call it truth, but mechanisms to bring people together, even just assistance. Sudanese American Physicians Association and different muftis around the U.S. and UK and others. But I do think that someone hopefully is gathering evidence of the kinds of atrocities that have been committed. And obviously the RSF has broadcast a lot of them themselves. But really keeping a record of all that has occurred so that when they do get to some sort of process, which hopefully would be Sudanese led and, really centered based on their own experiences, they'll have the evidence to get the truth out and have at least some accountability. But I think as long as the world continues to sort of turn a blind eye, as Mossab says, the Sudanese people, the population is just sort of left on its own to struggle and find a way. I'll just add one last point, which is that although Sudanese may not be feeling it yet on the ground, the war in Iran, with oil prices climbing because it's a global market, that is going to, if it hasn't yet been felt, it will start being felt very, very soon.
We will see what happens. Susan Page, Mossab Baba, thank you both for your time and your analysis. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahdi.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com.
All right. So moving along, this is the video that I was talking about that Zoran created.
I said I was going to tax the rich.
Wait.
When I ran for mayor, I said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today, we're taxing the rich. I'm thrilled to announce we've secured a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city. Like for this penthouse, which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million. This pied-à-terre tax is specifically designed for the richest of the rich, those who store their wealth in New York City real estate, but who don't actually live here. But even so, they're able to reap the huge financial rewards of owning property in, dare I say, the greatest city in the world. And most of the time, these units are sitting empty, since again, they don't actually live here. This is a fundamentally unfair system that hurts working New Yorkers. Now, it's coming to an end. This tax will raise at least $500 million directly for the city. It'll help fund things like free childcare, cleaner streets, and safer neighborhoods. As mayor, I believe everyone has a role to play in contributing to our city, and some a little bit more than others. Happy Tax Day, New York.
Yeah, I love that he gave a specific example of this. Well, hello, Linton. How are you? Welcome, welcome. Good to have you here. We just read Wuthering Heights, and there is a character named Linton, a last name named Linton. Wow, that was a struggle to get through. Is that where it comes from? Curious? If you aren't comfortable answering, you don't have to. I've been doing all right, you know, hanging in there with all of this nonsense happening in the world. Glad to hear that you're doing well. We're currently talking about some current events and then also gonna go over more revolutionary thought with some really great writers and speakers that I want to talk about. So this is a highlight of the Senate rejecting this war powers resolution to stop the war in Iran. And of course, the Senate acted how they do by just being complicit with all of this violence, listening to their donors rather than their constituents. Hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing?
Republicans are going to be held accountable now and in November for their unquestioning.
Yes, we did watch the
support
John
for
Oliver of
war,
J.D.
impulse
Vance.
and illusion that is costing
Nice. I'm glad you get to be
literally
home.
billions of dollars.
The only people in the world that are helping the Iranians right now are the Democrats. I think
Yeah,
the
that
military
John
needs to
Oliver
feel our support right now. I think
set
we have
is
to look
really
at the long
good.
game here. That a nuclear-armed Iran would
That was
be
a good
huge threat to
recommendation.
the future of Americans.
Thank you.
Could you imagine them having nuclear weapons as well as controlling the Strait of Hormuz? Gasoline would be $10 a gallon forever. So I know it's not easy, but I'm asking Americans to hang in there with us.
No.
The president wanted the Strait of Hormuz to be open, and he's closed it, and it's resulting in...
What is that guy's
Hang in
name?
there with us.
The president...
Could you imagine them having nuclear? I think we have that are helping the Iranians right now are the Democrats. I think the military needs to feel our support right now.
Roger
I think we have to
Marshall.
look at the long game here. That
Wanted the Strait of Hormuz to be open.
I'm gonna look him up.
And he's closed, and it's resulting in an incredible expense for everyday Americans. It's a dead-end policy, extended ceasefire.
Senator Roger
The president,
Marshall.
I think, has taken great care to comply with the War Powers Statute, which is important. He's within that.
Josh Hawley. Ew. This closet case that's wreaking havoc on the world. I had to dig another trench. Oh, in the rain too. Damn. Yeah, that is a lot. I hope it didn't last too long. It's not fun. Okay, so we do see, this is not surprising, his top donors, small business and entrepreneurship, homeland security, and governmental affairs. That means, like, weapons. New Terra Capital, National Republican Senatorial Committee, Venture Corps. That sounds like it's like some venture capitalist entity. I don't know what New Terra Capital is, but this explains how people vote. Let's see what this is. Integration of healthcare and technology. Oh, so he is part of, like, directly this corrupt system in healthcare of making things as expensive as possible. Cool. And he also gets donations from weapons manufacturers. What was, oh, wasn't terrible. Okay, that's good. What was terrible is trying to convince my coworker that Nick Shirley is a dumbass. But, yeah, he can't even speak. He, like, claims to, he has no sense of authority or legitimacy. It really is wild. People are just so desperate to have their prejudices be validated by someone else that they will go along with anyone, honestly. I think that's a huge part of how we've gotten here. That's not fun to deal with. Bewilders me that there are people who think he's to be taken seriously. I know, exactly. I'm like, he can barely speak in sentences. What is going on? Like, he has no credibility. It is insane. But this is where we're at. Late stage capitalism, fascism, same thing. And these people who are just desperately clinging on to power are like, see, he did this journalism. That's like all just lies to support their fascist agenda. It's gross. I still can't get over how he turned up to daycare. I know. Yeah. Where he was like, why aren't they letting us in? If they don't have anything to hide, why aren't they letting us in? Yeah, maybe because, like, it's a good thing that they aren't opening their doors to these grown men that are very threatening. Yeah. And the reason why people can't see all of this being just so false and manufactured is because they want permission to be as discriminatory as possible. It also has a lot of this deeply held anti-Black sentiment that they're leaning into. He also practically admitted to being homophobic. Yes. He said with people being gay, just don't be a drag queen. I know. This is what a lot of people say. A lot of conservative people say that they are not okay with trans people. Hi. I know this from experience. But then they're like, oh, some people can be gay. They're either like outright homophobic, or they're like, well, they can be gay, just like don't let me see it. That's like, okay, so you just don't want gay people to exist then, to like be in public life. Yeah, all of the double standards as well, because it's the same people like this shithead who is a closet case, speaking of, that they are for all of these extremely inhumane policies of stripping people of human dignity and human rights, civil rights, but they get to fuck whoever they want on the weekends. Trans people, queer people, and then they advocate for all of these oppressive policies. The double standard is staggering.
60-day window. And my hope is by the time we reach the end of
Look
that
at his
60 days, this
dumbass
conflict's gonna be
haircut.
There comes a time when the American people have to decide whether we're going to war. That time should have been months ago, before the invasion of Iran. Now the American families are living with the consequences when they pay for the gasoline at record prices. It's time for us to have a meaningful debate, a constitutional debate, as to whether or not we're going to continue this war in Iran.
Again, it's not surprising, but they all look like they're I know. Especially the geriatrics, like Dick Durbin. It's like, I'm glad that he's speaking out against this, but like he needs to speak out on a lot more issues. But yeah, this gerontocracy that we're in really has to go. Like, this, I think, is evidence, like, maybe humans shouldn't live this long. That, like, boomers, what is the generation before boomers? Is that the silent generation? I think that might be one above. Anyway, all of these, like, old people that are desperately clinging onto power because they're like, oh, this is the only relevance I have. It's just so unconscionable that they refuse to do any sort of mentorship and help better the circumstances for younger generations. Evil really does have a way of manifesting itself physically. I mean, honestly, like the way that these like fascists look, like the Ellison family, ugh, oh, like all of these billionaires, they're scary. I will read erotica sometimes. I like that. But there is a major theme in these kinds of novels or like novellas of like the billionaire and his lover, his secret lover, the billionaire's surrogate, like all of this. And I'm like, this is billionaire propaganda, just very overtly, but also like, who is wanting to get with a fucking billionaire? They're all like very ugly and on the inside and out, and they like all are Nazis and have a history of sexual abuse, not to mention like abusing people in every single aspect of their lives. I'm in the UK, and under 50s voting intention polls, the Greens win by a landslide. Yeah, but when all ages are polled, the far right catches right back up. I know. It's like, and unfortunately, it's like they aren't looking like they are not changing their minds. They don't listen to anyone. So, like, do we just have to wait till they die? We need to threaten them with, okay, we are going to put you in the homes, the senior centers that you voted to defund time and time again. We need to threaten them with that. Although they have so much wealth that they can, like, pay for that shit anyway. These boomers who were able to benefit from these progressive policies that were implemented after World War II, and they don't remember that implementation because they were so young, and so then they get to have this like deniability of being like, yeah, I get to be fiscally conservative and pull up the ladder behind me, even though I benefit from all of these things that I claim to be against. It's like, they really are just like stupid and very greedy. It's depressing. But we are seeing a tide shift with a lot of people rising up. We're seeing a lot of direct action now, like with these warehouses that are being lit on fire. People actually more willing to talk about progressive politics. I saw a boomer being interviewed on the street on the news yesterday. He was advocating for running the government more. Oh my God. Yeah, that's straight out of the Trump playbook. Fascist American playbook. More like a business. We've been doing that BS since Thatcher took... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. The Iron Lady fucked a lot of shit up. Like, they seem to ignore all of that. And they're like, oh, yeah, these business people are good at governing. What the fuck do they know about, like, policy implementation or, like, human rights or, like, actually having a social safety net? It's like the government is not a business and it shouldn't be run that way. That's how you know they're fascist, is because that's a hallmark of fascism, is this integration of the private sector, business sector with the government. And they're like, oh, I get to make a lot more money this way. It means that a lot of people won't have money. It will make more people homeless. And I'm going to complain about the homeless people, but their only experience with human rights is figuring their way around them. Yes, exactly. To maximize profits. And it's not even enough to have their children and grandchildren be affected. They're so fucking selfish. I mean, this isn't all boomers, but this is a majority of them. Like, honestly, it's like they're so selfish and self-centered that they're like, why don't you just, like, work hard and do this? It's like, you created these shitty circumstances. Don't you realize? They benefit from socialist policy and then turn around and demonize socialism. Exactly. Yeah, it's so hypocritical. And then they want to say that it's all because of, like, their own merit, that it's because they're extra great, not because that they benefit from all of these policies. It really is wild. Okay. I saw an article, I mean, just continuing that thought real quick. I saw an article the other day that was like, boomers are leaving their kids with a headache. And I'm like, what aren't they leaving us with a headache? Like, the world. It's the world that they've fucked up that is a headache. And it's not just a fucking headache. It's like the end of humanity, possibly. Yeah, plenty of based boomers. We saw that when the Met carried off. Yes, exactly. Yes, for Palestine action. There have been a lot of people coming out. That's putting it lightly. I know. Yeah, it's like there are some boomers that are doing the work, but sadly, there are so many of them that, like, just don't give a fuck. And it's like, that's such ugly behavior. That's so gross to, like, be so callous to your fellow man and not give a shit about other people. Like, that's so disgusting. Like, that's ugly behavior. Okay. So this is Josh Johnson. He's a comedian and he is extremely talented. I keep, like, going in and out of this. Sorry. But he's talking about the right-wing media ecosystem and how there is the civil war breaking out among the fascists. And, oh, that's so delicious. I love seeing the infighting. We need to take these wins where we can get them because they're, like, all of a sudden feeling betrayed. And it's like, yeah, this is what has been happening, you idiots. My parents luckily aren't that way, but most of their siblings are. I know, that really is incredible that they aren't that way. But think of their nest egg. I know. But what about my retirement? It's like, yeah, you still have it. Ugh. It's a shit show. This is why we need a world strike, in my opinion. That we need to halt the world's economy, to hold all of these people accountable, the capitalist class. If you are interested, you can sign a strike card with a form that I have in the profile and also submit your demands. If we are going to halt the world's economy in your wildest dreams, what should we be asking for? Because if we are able to do that, we need to take advantage of the moment, seize the moment, and get what we need. All right, let's get into this Josh Johnson set. This is his longest set yet that he has done. And again, he does a new set every single week. He is insanely talented.
doing Colbert on Wednesday. I believe that's tax day. But on the bright side, I'll be doing Colbert. You can check me out there. In the meantime, I'm just waiting for the show to start. Any minute now. Everyone will get here.
It's Josh Johnson in 3D!
Ooh, I'm in 3D. Good popcorn.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks.
Cute little animation.
Things have been very bad. Things have been. This is really bad. This is like it because look, it's usually
end of the world
not
shit.
good, but this is worse. This is very bad. This is end of the movie bad. Like this is
Hello.
usually when it gets this bad, credits start to roll. No, it's bad. But every once in a while, something happens. Even while things are bad, something happens that may not even be related. It's not like a glimmer of hope against something. It's just something completely independent of everything else. Something not even political, but it happens and it like brightens your day. You see it, and I won't say it's like a full distraction, but for a little while, it makes it feel like everything's not on fire, you know? When I saw Kristi Noem's husband,
Yeah. Again, these closet cases
I was like,
who indulge in the most deviant, what they would consider deviant sexual activities,
no,
and
when I
then
saw
demonize other
Kristi
people who
Noem's
engage in this in the open. Yeah, who the fuck cares if you want to be a bimbo,
I can
if you
only
want to
speak
wear
myself,
tits?
but I've never told a picture to wait so many times in my life.
Just like, don't be a hypocrite about it.
Wait.
These godly families, see what happens in the background.
Wait. What? What? Huh. What in the Mrs. Doubtfire is going on? This is crazy. This is wild.
Yeah. There's a quote by,
Whoa.
I think like a queer journalist that was like, these people want to queen out on the weekend and then oppress
If you
the
don't
people who
know,
are actually living
Kristi
their
Noem.
truth during the
Kristi
day.
Noem was the Secretary for Homeland Security, and she was she was an interesting pick. She was interesting the way that like a peanut butter pickle sandwich is interesting.
Yeah, disgusting
Where
and
you
shouldn't
see
exist.
someone with it and you're like, oh, don't do that. That's
Yeah.
That's bound to not turn out well. I'm not even acting like I know it'll happen, but it won't be good.
Shooting her dog.
No, she
and
was
a
the
baby
Secretary
goat.
for Homeland Security, and she was very bad at her job. Which is, here's the thing. This is, hopefully I can make myself clear here. This is the struggle with describing what I've been thinking ever since I saw how bad. Okay, she was bad at her job, but her job was to do bad. Like her job was to do evil, and she was bad at it. That doesn't make her good. It just means
she's dumb.
It just means like her job's to do more evil, but then she was bad at it. It would be like if a burglar broke into your home but then tripped and hurt their ankle. And so now they're in your house, fully broken in. They broke the window, they're inside, but they're like, ah.
I saw a clip on Fox News talking about how they were worried that birth rates among women. Oh, I saw something similar to this.
No, she's bad at,
it's like,
doing the bad thing. She still did plenty of bad. No, it was still pretty evil.
Maybe it's because
but she wasn't as
things
good
are
as the
incredibly
people that
unaffordable,
want
and people don't want to be having kids
wanted
that young.
The bad to be.
It's part of the fascist, white Christian nationalist agenda. The hysteria of declining white birth rates.
Right?
Yeah.
And the devil's like, you gotta
because
get out there and do as much evil as possible.
uteruses
And you were like, oh, can I go to the bathroom first? Like, you just
good for just having uteruses.
The evil wasn't as much of a priority as it was for you than to just do whatever it was you wanted to do, which is a lot of what she did, apparently. She did a lot of evil, but then some of the stuff she did was not on evil's agenda at all.
Yeah, it's like they got rid of access to abortion.
Even the evil
that
was
didn't help.
So
when they were thinking that would help, which it is revealing to their larger projects of it's about
She's not
control.
about that life. She's not about it. She's not about. I'm trying to do evil, and she just over here lollygagging. And look, once again, it doesn't make you good to procrastinate doing bad. It just means you're bad at being bad as well. It could be worse if you were good, but you're not, so it's the regular amount of bad it was gonna be. And she was bad at her job. She spent so much money.
Nazi-era medals. They already said there's some sort of
my
policy.
money, your money, our money. It was the money
where
that
they're like,
we
if you have
give
5 or more kids or something. Yeah, so
and
that's
she
already
spent so
happening.
much of that money on ads.
I'm gonna look up this policy.
She made herself the star of some ads for ICE. Which is wild because we know about ICE. They don't really need commercials. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody spent millions and millions of dollars on ads about wiping. We know. Words got out. Pretty wild stuff, yes. And so she spent all this money. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, where some people are even like, what was that part even for?
Yes, exactly.
She gave
Yeah.
contracts
to
people with business.
They're doing just blatant Nazi shit. And somehow boomers think that they're on the side not of Nazis. The ones that are not identifying as Nazis. You are acting in a very Nazi-esque way, right? Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
I think we're 5 days old.
But
That's
it's
that
about
old
control.
School grifter. That's that.
This xenophobia,
You out here
othering,
getting government contracts.
making
What
sure
do you
that
know?
women
I
are
just
not in
started
the
a company.
workforce.
I just started a company. What do you need done? I can't do it, but I'll figure it out for the right price. Spent all this money on ads, then gets brought in front of Congress, and she's sitting there in front of Congress. They're asking her, hey, what are you doing?
Okay. I think there was an award of some sort that they were saying. But there's this give birth in this economy. U.S. women scoff at Trump's meager baby bonuses, where they're giving people $5,000. Oh, yeah, because that will cover even one one session of getting prenatal care. I mean, maybe a couple, but yeah, it is so insane. I think there's an award somewhere, similar to what they had in Hungary, that other fascist state that recently Viktor Orban was overthrown, so that's great. I mean, he was replaced by another very conservative person, but the more overtly Nazi identifying people we can get out of power, the better. That's literally what Harris had as her platform. Yeah, these child tax credits. Yeah, and then he's like, we can't do childcare. We can't do daycare. even though he said they would. It's like, yeah, if you wanted people to have more kids, maybe you would pay them better. Maybe you would provide healthcare access, universal child care, maternity, paternity leave, parental leave, more vacation time. But it's not about that because they want to keep exploiting people and oppressing people because they're capitalist Nazis.
And not just what you do, because you gotta remember, it's a wide variety of
Viktor
reasons
Orban is
that
in
you
the
got
heart of
brought in.
European
There are some
fascism.
people
Yes,
that
exactly.
see these ICE
It can't hurt to
detention
cut that out,
centers
even if the other dude
for what
was
they
in his
are and
party.
what they quickly
Yeah,
became.
that's what I
Instead
think.
of just
It's
detention
like
centers, there are these
him
new wave concentration
having such a
camps that
colossal
people
loss
are detained in. They
is
don't know when they're going to get
huge
out. They're not getting
for
court dates.
sending a
They're
message
living in
to
inhumane
these
conditions
other
and
right-wing
everything.
movements
And-
throughout the world, but especially in
And then
Europe.
there were people that wanted to bring her in because they were like,
I think it's because J.D. Vance also went there.
how'd you
like,
spend
he doesn't help anything.
$40,000 on miscellaneous? How does that happen?
Progress is progress. Yeah, we
There
have
were
to
some
take the
people that
wins
were
where we
like,
can
you're
get
just
them.
not using the funds correctly to do the evil, and I want to ask you about it.
Viktor Orban talking about melting. He also
As they
looks
bring
evil.
her up in front of Congress, asking her all these questions, and then they ask her about the money specifically. They're like, "This is a lot of money, and you're using it in ways that just don't seem on the up and up, wasteful at best." And she's like, "Well, the president told me to like I could," and I'll be honest with y'all, that's the first time that somebody has lied on Trump, and I believe Trump. Because because Trump was like, I didn't know anything about this. Like, what? Trump was over here like, what are you talking about? You're not gonna throw me under the bus. That's my bus.
That bigotry is a side effect of
And so
baldness.
she got fired.
Those rallies look like a crystal balls. Oh my god.
And so yeah, she's not at Homeland Security anymore.
Just
They
these
basically
cue
were
balls.
trying to cover up.
Amazing.
How,
I also
I
have a
guess,
theory
mad Trump
that in
was
Utah,
and the
because that's where I'm
firing.
located,
So
that there's so many bald men is because there's so much inbreeding that has happened, like as a natural result. Maybe that's just with fascists in general, is that because like Utah, there are plenty of fascists here, where there's so much inbreeding because they don't value diversity, and they're like famously always like abusing their family members and shit, that it's like, okay, now we know where all of these sort of moral defects, like how they're manifesting themselves. That is incredible. I love that. I also think bigotry, it just like sucks the moisture out of their skin. Like, they have never heard of moisturizer. Why do they all have such fucking dry skin? It really is concerning. I mean, I know that's like a hallmark of whiteness a lot of the time, is like not moisturizing, but it really is wild.
instead of calling it a firing, they moved her to a
And to
position
have, like,
that
bad
didn't exist 5
cosmetic
days
surgeries.
ago. And
Bad
now she's
makeup.
doing that. I think she's like guardian of the Americas.
That alone
or
should make them
something.
want to be allies, that they would have better makeup artists.
They
Better
fired her from
surgeons.
being Secretary of Homeland Security and gave her a job that sounds like a lie. If we were at a party and you asked me what I did, I said I'm guardian of the Americas. You would be like, he don't have a job. He don't have a job at all. I don't even even know if I'm getting the name right, but I'm pretty sure it's Guardian of the Americas, and it
Yeah.
was so clearly made
That
up that day
insane
because
made-up job that they
were
gave
too
to Kristi
embarrassed to say
Noem
they just
to
fired
save
her because
face.
she messed up or because she lied on the president or because of whatever. So
Crazy
then they
bit of
made up a
Palantir
whole.
lore.
If you went on a date
UK
with
head of the
someone,
company is the grandson
and you know
of the
you go on a date,
infamous British
especially you get to know
fascist
each other,
leader,
just having a
Oswald Mosley.
good
See?
time and everything. Tell me about yourself. What you have any brothers and sisters? All the basic
Peter
questions.
Thiel?
And you ask, what do you do?
Yeah,
And
they're
then
all
they
Nazis.
Say,
It's
I'm
like
the
he's a
guardian of
Nazi,
the
Sam
American.
Altman over OpenAI is a Nazi, Elon Musk is a Nazi, Jeff Bezos is probably a Nazi, that like Virgin Mobile guy. They're all Nazis.
You
And
would
they
be
like
oh, okay, all right.
are super into
Well, we about to split
eugenics
this
and
check.
having a million kids.
It's
It's like, why do we need more of you?
Nah.
What makes you think you're so special?
Guardian of the
You're
Americas.
gross.
Guardian of the Americas sounds like the Avenger that died first. Yeah. That's the whole reason we had to have like 4 or 5 movies, because Guardian of the Americas was supposed to show up, but then
Yeah.
he
It
broke
was
into
the pilot,
secret layer,
Guardian of the Americas, the pilot version that never
the
aired.
secret layer of the villain, and as he was breaking in, the cape got caught in the window and he tripped, and now he's sitting there. Oh, y'all gonna have to shoot me. All right? Guardian of the Americas is crazy.
Peter Thiel, going back to him,
Oh,
is another
man.
one that's like, oh, you look evil. Why would anyone
But
trust
what
what you
just-
say? But
Christy and her husband.
apparently some people do because they worship money.
Pam Bondi got fired.
Yes, Pam Bondi also got fired. It's also not an accident, like as we're talking about these like sexist
once again,
policies,
okay, so
that
Pam
the
Bondi
women, these fascist
was
women, are
also
the first
bad
to
at
be
her
kicked
job.
out of their in-group
But her
because
job was to do evil.
they don't think women should
Like her job,
be
her
ambitious
job
or have
was
careers.
Bad. It was to be as bad as possible towards the direction of where the bad people wanted her to point justice. She
Louis
would
Mosley
point
is
it,
a
and then
real
she would
contender
put
for the most
the
punchable
people in
face
prison
award.
that the
I don't know
bad
if I
people
know what he
said were
looks
bad.
like. I'm gonna look
And
this
she
up.
wasn't good at it. Because she would go to court. She would take them to court and then be like, look, I already built a case against these bad people, and the case rock solid. All right, you about to go to jail.
you're
You
so
gotta go to jail. And I
right.
hope you love jail because you're about to get a lot of
Ew,
it. And then they would get to court, and a judge
So
would
many
be
of
like,
these
this
people,
doesn't make any sense.
it
Like,
has
the
been
thing
very
that you-
clear that they've not been like slapped on the mouth, and it shows, and that needs to end.
Well, the case that you brought before me is so ridiculous. It
Yeah.
made me question if I know the law at all.
And they have endless money, and they dress
Like, was
horribly.
it a joke when you brought it? Like, is it?
Like, there really is no amount of money that can buy
I thought
you
I was being pranked.
taste.
I haven't seen a worse case in my life. They
Or
kept losing in
likability.
court. Pam kept trying to prosecute the president's political enemies, and it just was not working because it just wasn't. There wasn't even good stuff. It was like, well, I'm pretty sure there's an issue with. I'm pretty sure that there's an issue with.
Yeah, this is when she's talking about the Dow.
Letitia James filled out her
The
paperwork
Dow,
right on
the
her apartment. How about that?
It's over
Oh, you about to go to jail. Oh, you catch a jail right now, all right? Did you put a 1 when you really meant 7? Ooh, you going down. No, it was very bad cases.
Yeah, in the U.S., we don't even have smart
like
fascists.
they were over here.
They're incredibly dumb,
and
which goes to
Diet
show
Kobe,
how
right?
we are
And it's not
truly
like
in
I'm a
late-stage
Kobe fan. I
capitalism,
don't-
the fall of empire,
Look,
because
I'm
of the
just
rampant
saying what I saw.
incompetence and not being able to
But
like hold these
They
people
tried to
accountable.
indict Kobe, and then apparently they took Kobe to court, and they were supposed to present their case. And to my knowledge, the sum of their case was like, it's Comey. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
look at him. Doesn't he look like he did it? What are you accusing him of? Being Comey. We know he's doing that.
Oswald, that guy's granddad, had his
No,
wedding
it
in
was-
Germany
it
in
was very bad,
1936,
and so
hosted
Trump
at
was
Joseph
obviously getting
Goebbels' house.
frustrated
Ew!
with, Pam Bondi.
With Hitler in
And-
attendance, and now his grandson runs
I
the
will
biggest
say-
AI military company on the planet.
Maybe this is just me.
Yeah, all of these, and then all of these Nazis who escaped to
But
South
Pam
Africa,
is one
like
of the funniest names to scream when you're mad. Like it.
Peter Thiel, and his, like the rest of his family,
You know what I mean? Like, I can
and
see-
Elon Musk,
You know, you burn dinner.
claiming that there is white genocide.
Oh, you
And then,
cooked it
is
to
it any
death,
accident that they're funding apartheid and genocide in Israel and wanting to do the exact same thing in the U.S.?
You know what I mean? Like, Pam just sound like it's like when you yell that name angry, it just feels
said in
like
Israel,
the
in
thing that's
Palestine.
been yelled about is sometimes just not
By
serious
Israel
at all. Like
and the U.S.
Like Pam sound like someone screaming. Pam just sounds
and
like
many other Western
"Pam,
countries.
Your potluck roast poisoned everybody at church, Pam. Which is it? Are you gonna cook it to death or are you gonna undercook it? Because chicken's not supposed to be pink, Pam. And you know that Trump was screaming Pam's name. Pam probably made him so mad so many different times. Look,
I think
as
Tulsi
someone-
Gabbard is going to go next. I
As
think
someone
Caroline
who's been
Leavitt,
fired plenty,
who's the press secretary, she's also pregnant right now. So she's fulfilling that fascist dream of like constantly reproducing. But she will be discriminated against because of her pregnancy. Like that's going to happen. She's probably like, if she's not fired before she goes on whatever leave she has available, they're not letting her back. Did you see they burned down an Elbit factory in the Czech Republic last month? I knew there was a factory, but I didn't know it was that one in particular. Fierce. It's like that's happening much more in the US now. And this is what happens when people are oppressed for so long and their material conditions are not improving. People can only be exploited and oppressed for so long before they start burning shit. It's great to see because they care way more about their assets than human beings. And it's way less expensive to actually give people a livable wage and benefits than it is to have all of your inventory go up in flames. I love to see it. Some of the biggest insurers in the UK no longer cover Elbit's property. They kept getting their shit fucked up. Yes, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes is like this kind of direct action where it's like then the capitalists actually respond and answer to the will of the people is when they are forced to. They aren't going to be doing this willingly. It's like with that fire that recently happened in the US and California, this warehouse fire, immediately after they increased the minimum wage that they were paying their workers. It's like it has a direct effect in improving the conditions for people when you directly attack their capital. Which is why unionizing and striking, direct action, is so important in fighting fascism. I love to hear it.
Pam was getting fired.
Amazing. Yes. Yep. Black bloc activities. That's something we were talking about yesterday. Black bloc tactics. That is so fierce. That's punk. That's what punk means. I love that. Thank you for sharing. If we're ever having a bad day, just pulling up some of these videos of these fires, it does help, I have to say.
Someone who's been fired in my life, I was just watching Pam's moves and I was like, ooh, days are numbered. I would call out sick today, Pam. No, don't get me wrong. I've been fireable in my life, and I've just, wow, saw a lot of my tactics on screen. Just the way she tried to cover her up, and ooh, it was bad. You know, because she was out here. Early on, there were some people that were like, this, Pam Bondi, this is gonna be an effective extension of the president's agenda. You know, because she even said
she knew
herself
Jeffrey
a
Epstein.
thing that normally attorney generals don't do, which is that she
And
would be
didn't
working
prosecute
closely
him.
with the president, and she is excited and honored to push forward his agenda. Now, normally, the president and the attorney general act like they've never been in a room together. You know, because they at least have to give the idea. They at least have to put it out there that maybe the attorney general, no matter who the president is being impartial. And Pam didn't do that at all. Pam snitched on herself immediately. Like, anything he says is what I'm going to do.
Yes. I did see this.
We have multiple dents now.
Yep. Anarchy tactics. These structured anarchy tactics work. I love to see this. Also, I saw there was like a blockade by like farmers and their machines on the road because of all of the fuel prices. Like, the Irish know how to resist fascism, but they especially know how to resist it in relation to colonial extraction. It's super fierce.
It's up for all of y'all. Everybody going to court. Anybody he doesn't like, I don't like. We were all together. Even the way that Pam would compliment Trump, you could tell. You could tell it was just like too much. You know what I mean? Like, Mr. President, you know, thank you first of all for your leadership. You know, I know that we don't get to see each other as much as we like, but I can just feel you leading whenever I walk. Even like sometimes I'll be walking down the hall and I'll be like, I know he want me to go this way. I know. You know, sometimes someone will say take a left. I'll be like, I don't even know where that left came from. It came from
Britain
you and your leadership, Mr. President.
Ireland and
the fact
Palestine.
that you
Yes,
exude
exactly.
so much leadership,
Which
I don't
is
even know what
why
to do
the
next unless
Irish
you tell
have,
me.
like,
Mr.
for a very
President,
long
thank you for
time,
that.
been
And thank you
outspoken
also
for
being one of the
Palestinian
greatest presidents
liberation.
ever with great shoulders. I don't
And
care
why many
what the
Irish
media
people in
says
general
about you.
support
You have a great posture, Mr.
decolonization
President,
around the
and-
world
and your
because they
skin, too. Your
have
skin is
directly
glowing, all
experienced
right?
it.
A lot of haters out there going to talk about your skin, but your skin,
Like how we've seen like
impeccable.
kneecap,
Also, your hair clearly not a weave, not
how
a weave
much
at all.
influence they have had in like
Love the fact that
supporting
you have
the
your flowing locks out for
Palestinian
the American public,
cause,
because that's
using
type
the
of
Irish
president that you
language,
are. And
which is
you
a
could
direct
see
way to
on his face, even
decolonize.
Trump would be like, all right.
It's very cool.
You gotta chill. Oh, wow. You know, people made fun of Trump for falling asleep at press conferences, but if you watch back, a lot of those naps were when Pam Bondi was talking. Oh. But then she was on Fox News, a friendly network to the administration. And she was on Fox News, and they asked her, this wasn't a gotcha. This wasn't hard journalism. They just asked her in general because of everything that had been said in the campaign and now that Trump had won. You're saying that you have a list of Epstein's clients. Are you going to make that list available to the public? And then she's over here. It's on my desk right now, waiting to be reviewed. It's what the president wants. We want to be the most transparent administration in
and
the
then
history of the
came out and said it was a
presidency. And
hoax.
then, just because I know Trump and I know he likes to watch TV, I know he was watching Fox News, and I'm sure he was sitting there going, "Bam!" What are you doing, Pam? What's wrong with you? Oh.
Okay. I, of course, planned like a lot for today. I think I'm going to finish this video tomorrow just to give it the time that I want it to. I did want to get to these videos, though, with Arundhati Roy and Nawal El-Saadawi talking about the Iran war and also how democracy is largely an illusion, which is something I think is very true, especially these days. That's the concept that Socrates was going around saying to the Greeks, and that's what got him killed, executed, because he was saying that democracy is an illusion, that it gives us the illusion of choice while the people in power just do whatever they want. Seems pretty relevant to today. Okay, so this video is from 6 years ago, I believe. Let me check. Yes, 6 years ago. So, like, the writing has been on the wall of how this would go. I really love Arundhati Roy. She is an amazing author and writer, but also, like, activist, and has been jailed in India for her writing. She has been banned from India for her writing because of her criticism of the Indian government and Hindu nationalism. So she is super cool. She's been outspoken about Palestine, colonization.
The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh as we continue with part 2 of our conversation with Arundhati Roy, the award-winning writer, the winner of the Booker Prize in 1997 for her first novel, The God of Small Things, her second novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, you must also read. Now a collection of her nonfiction writing titled My Seditious Heart will be out in June. Arundhati, I wanted to begin by asking you about Kashmir.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
not an issue that's covered very much in the United States at all.
I
mean, after all, it doesn't have Trump in the title.
Yeah, honestly.
And mainly, he
until
hasn't spoken
we,
about it very much.
the whole system,
whatever Trump
which is
talks
like
about,
our
that
labor,
has the
which
red
is
carpet rolled out at every network, and you hear it over and over
making
again.
it all run.
But you see Kashmir as a global flashpoint. Explain what's happening there.
Yeah, in terms of electoralism.
Well, let's put it simply that
and it's sad because
April, India and
like
Pakistan
we know
became
that
the first
like electoral politics, that's not going to save us, that we have to have community organizing, especially unionizing, like what you're saying with labor actually striking and taking our power back, halting this machine. But unfortunately, like electoral politics do impact our material conditions as well. But it's like, what controls electoral politics? It is largely capital, like what you're saying. So yeah, it's depressing. But we have seen, like with the few examples of more progressive politics, like Zoran Mamdani actually implementing a social safety net, how there is an opportunity for people to actually have the will and means to improve material conditions for people, but it is extremely rare to get these kinds of people in power, which is why there were so many moneyed interests that were dumping money in the campaign against him, because now we can see what can be done, what is possible, and it doesn't mean that like the system doesn't need to be dismantled in many ways, but that like there really are so many forces that are controlling the government. I mean, like, as we've been saying, largely capital.
Countries, nuclear armed countries ever in history to bomb each other, you know. So that should be enough reason for everybody to sit up and pay attention.
Quickly explain that when India and Pakistan
So
got the
basically, Kashmir is a place which was an independent kingdom of its own before partition and before both Pakistan and India claimed it, while the majority of Kashmiris, the Kashmir Valley anyway, are calling for independence and have been for many years. It's the most densely occupied military zone in the world. And in February, in fact, on the 14th of February, there was a devastating terrorist attack by a local Kashmiri boy on an Indian security forces convoy, following which, you know, Modi ordered these surgical strikes, and then the Pakistanis came back and, you know, bombed India. It was all a bit of posturing on both sides, but the point is, these are...
And India uses, in order to justify this kind of violence against Kashmiris, is that they use a lot of propaganda that is very Islamophobic, because there is a large population of Muslims in Kashmir. And that is one of the reasons, well, like with Pakistan, wanting to have control over things, where there are these larger religious nationalist projects that are at play. It's been a disenfranchising couple of weeks in the Green Party over here. Yeah. I'm still a member and I'm going to vote for them, but it is clearer than ever that there is a strong liberal Zionist presence. I know, that is so disappointing. The conference was a shit show the other week. I heard about this, but I haven't seen much of it. If you have any, like, links to this, I would love to go over this tomorrow. But yeah, that is so disappointing. Where it's like, it really is rare to actually get people in power who have the will and freedom. They aren't just bought by capital, to actually implement policies that provide human dignity. Just all of these forces, these capitalist forces, undermining the democratic process, which is why democracy is largely an illusion. We don't consent really to much of the material conditions that we experience.
Very, and Kashmir is just, as we spoke about earlier, you know, Kashmir is a situation in which anything can happen at any time. And it's like a pressure cooker. It's, you know, more and more young people are joining the militancy, and because of the political
the Zionism,
situation
racism
in
bill
India,
to be
with
filibustered.
the rise
That's
of Hindu
right.
nationalism,
That's right.
it's constantly being used as a way of getting the Hindu vote together,
Zionism,
quote unquote, the Hindu vote together.
Has a chokehold on our governments.
It's a cauldron in which anything can happen, and a very, you know, vicious media environment in India, where you have these 24-hour news channels just screaming nationalism.
And there are, like, in this example that Arundhati Roy is talking about, there are Zionist policies that are being pursued by India by saying, like, oh, this land belongs to us, and we're coming to save the people. And it really is this forcible way to acquire land in a very violent manner and have these endlessly expansionist, fascist projects. And it comes at the cost of so many human lives. That's like, we are just cannon fodder for these people. But this is why we need a world strike, in my mind, to actually hold these people accountable. Remind the billionaire class, the Epstein class, that, you know what, we actually make their engine run.
factual, what is not, and so on. So unless, I mean, it needs to be flipped around. Kashmir needs to become a buffer zone between two nuclear powers, not a flashpoint.
And I think one of the, I don't know if you, I mean, the largest number of Kashmiris, of course, want neither to be part of Pakistan nor to be part of India, though this
they want independence.
Rarely the perspective that's represented in the media in either country. So could you talk a little bit about that? And also about the Pulwama attack. You said it was a local Kashmiri boy. Now, was that local Kashmiri boy part of Jaish-e-Mohammed?
Well, that's what the whatever was put out
group
said. One doesn't know now. I don't even know what is Jaish-e-Mohammed anymore, because the situation in Kashmir is that there are real terror groups, there are fake terror groups, there are penetrated terror groups. There was a massive intelligence failure, which even the governor of Kashmir.
Also, this concept of Zionism, this fascist ideology in many different areas of the world, how it's being implemented by creating groups of resistance because of the incredible violence that they are committing, and that they then use this kind of resistance that people are forced into to protect themselves and say like, oh, they're terrorists. It's like, oh, this is what's happening with this group. It's what's happening with Hamas and Hezbollah and any other place where there is resistance. Like even in the US, them trying to be like, yeah, and Antifa is a terrorist group, even though like there isn't an organized group of Antifa or just people resisting in general. It's used to be categorized as terrorism. It's like, I wish they were more interesting. The fascists were more interesting with like their tactics, but they really aren't. British drawn borders acting as intended. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which is why like we have to keep talking about decolonization and that it is an active thing that must be pursued, including decolonizing our minds.
Spoke about, and then suddenly everyone went quiet. Modi started campaigning using the pictures of the dead security forces, which was so terrible, when, and there's absolutely no talk about the intelligence failure. How did it happen? How could so much RDX be smuggled in when, people are stopped and checked while they're going to buy milk? How did this happen? The convoy, the route of the convoy is always protected. There were many serious intelligence inputs saying that an attack is expected, and it happened. There's a clip of the army chief being asked by the media before the attack, saying, there's an attack that has been flagged. What do you have to say about it? And he says, Karne do dekhi jayegi, let them do it, we'll see, And suddenly everyone has disappeared. Any kind of inquiry about what actually happened has been muted. And this has been used as an election campaign. Also, many of us, including me, in writing, in an article published
inciting
on HuffPost, said
issues
months before that
violently, and then using these issues to run for their corrupt campaigns.
The symmetry and the
another fascist
narrative
move.
Convenience of it all. But so that is that is the Pulwama is a really big question mark, which we need to understand, like what actually happened. Because Kashmir, historically, there have been many false flag attacks. The killers of the Chitti Singhpura massacre were then killed by the army, and later they were recognized to be just local people who had been rounded up, put into militant outfits, and then burnt. Then their fresh clothes had been put on the burnt bodies, and then later it was discovered from DNA tests that they were just local people rounded up and killed. So, you know,
There was a
it's
Maoist
a very,
killed
very
in
deep
India
tale.
last year
That's why
too.
I say
Yeah,
that only
yeah.
fiction can tell
And
the
there have
truth about
been a lot
Kashmir.
of
So
successful
let's talk about
Maoist
nonfiction and
movements
this
in India,
epic
especially in
book that
Kerala,
is being published
and
at the beginning of
that
June,
is why
called The
they
Seditious Heart.
have
Why did you call it The
targeted
Seditious
people
Heart?
and
the
killed this
last,
person is
one of
because
the
that
last
they
essays in it
understand
was called My
that it
Seditious
actually
Heart,
has
you know,
liberated
and
people.
Really, I think if there is a theme running through it, it's really questioning the idea of the nation. You know, not just in terms of security, but also in
trying to remember
terms
the
of,
name
you
of
know,
that
like
person.
the
I'm gonna
essay
look
on
this
the
up.
big dam in the Narmada. It says, you know, who owns the rivers, the forests, the fish. These are huge debates. So, and also because, you know, I'm constantly being accused of sedition, of anti-nationalism, and so on. So
To correct it, My Seditious Heart.
My Seditious Heart, yes.
And so talk about the essays in this book. I mean, that go back decades.
Nambala
Well, the
Keshava
first
Row.
essay, actually the first essays are in the appendix, because those essays were written before I became the famous Arundhati Roy. You know, those essays were two called The Great Indian Rape Trick, and they were essays I wrote
you got it too.
after
I
watching
was
this
covering it, the
film
chat
called
on my
Bandit
end.
Queen, which was about, you know, Pulan Devi, the famous female bandit in India.
Yeah, this is what governments do
She was
when
India's
people actually
most famous bandit
use
who was
the
turned into
few
history's
avenues
most famous
for
victim of
recourse
rape,
in
you know, because the whole film
taking
was
back
just
power.
this voyeuristic rape saga of this extraordinary woman. But that's in the appendix. But the first essay in the book is The End of Imagination, which was my my response to India's nuclear tests, my response to the fact there's an obsession with language, I think, in my writing, you know, and that is, I do feel that those nuclear tests changed the public language of India, you know, changed the way we are allowed to speak in public. Now,
Yeah, that's
that
interesting.
started then, this whole nationalist, hyper-nationalist, hyper-virile, hyper-Hindu nationalist rhetoric, which happened in some quarters, but suddenly it became sanctioned public speech.
Of all the
Started
articles
from
say
there.
killed in a clash,
So
the real
I
story, he was in
of
custody
course,
and
you know,
taken out to the
just
jungle
won the
to be
Booker, and I
executed.
was the
Right.
sort of darling
Unless I'm
of
mixing
the
up the story
media,
with
and
a different
I
incident.
was
No, I think you're
being
right.
placed on the high table as an offering from this aggressive new India. You know, we have Miss World, Miss Universe, Miss Booker Prize, and now we even have nuclear bombs. And I just stepped off the table, you know, and wrote that, which then, you know, it immediately sort of created a strange schism where there was one section of people who just couldn't
Wikipedia says
how
it was
dare
during a
she do this,
gunfight,
you know.
but,
that was
I mean,
the
can we
beginning
trust
of
that?
the view of me as a seditious, anti-national person, which I have no problems with. And on the
Anti-national
other hand,
became anti-bomb. Anti-nuclear bomb was anti-national.
Well, now it's all, you know, put together. So then after that, it just began this long journey into the heart of rebellion in India, you know, a long quest for understanding the place that I live in very deeply. That was what followed. I mean, so the greater common good about the building of dams, which led to a deep, to me, that is the foundation, really, of my political understanding. That essay, those people that I met and spoke with, you know. And then, India was everything was being privatized, the new markets were opening, mining, you know, so the journey from these nonviolent protests deep into the heart of walking with the comrades inside the forest with the Maoist guerrillas, also protesting about the same thing, you know, protecting the forests and so on. And then, then a lot about 9/11, about the American wars. But the longest essay in the book, perhaps the most academic and heavily footnoted, and one of the deadliest essays in it is The Doctor and the Saint, which is about the debate between the iconic Dalit leader in India, B.R. Ambedkar, who was Gandhi's greatest antagonist, who
Yes.
and it was initially written as an introduction to his.
Did a lot of the work that people think Mohandas Gandhi did. He was still very classist, casteist, Gandhi was, and supported more of this integration of Hinduism with the government. And she actually has a video that I highly recommend. We watched it on a stream before, of her deconstructing this kind of myth making that has been created around Gandhi. It doesn't mean that like all of his work is bad that he did in his life, but people tend to revere him when there are people who did more of the work that he claims to have done, or people think that he did. And Ambedkar is one of these people.
Iconic essay called Annihilation of Caste, which Gandhi responded to. And so I wrote this piece, which is now a book also, but it's also in my seditious heart, called The Doctor and the Saint, about the debate between Ambedkar and Gandhi. And it sort of connects the whole debate on race in South Africa particularly, and caste in India, and also the inability of the left, both, I mean, it doesn't deal with the left here that much, but over there, that is true even in The God of Small Things, of the left's inability to understand what is at the heart, the engine that runs India, which is caste.
Mm. And Arundhati, in the first part of our interview, you talked about the era that we know is coming to an end. So could you explain what you mean by that, and the significance of this collection coming out in that moment?
Yeah, well, the essay, the book is not coming out because the era that we know is coming to an end. It's just, you know, happens to be
coinciding with.
But I do feel that, you know, I mean, as we have read now, you're really rushing towards extinction. You know, just yesterday there was a report about more than 1 million species, you know,
going extinct.
That just over the last 30 years, you've had such a accelerated form of mammals disappearing. The understanding of, like I call it, the understanding, you know, the connection between insects, mammals, the acidity in the ocean, corals, fish, water in rivers, forests, rain. You know, you can develop artificial intelligence, but you can't understand these basic things, which are just, you can't understand the connection between the planet you live on and your place in the web of life.
Arundhati, as we wrap up, you said in your speech, over these last few years, given the wars it has waged, the international treaties it has arbitrarily reneged on, the U.S. government perfectly fits its own definition of a rogue state. And now resorting to the same old tactics, the same tired falsehoods, and the same old fake news about nuclear weapons, it's gearing up to bomb Iran. That will be the biggest mistake it has ever made. Your thoughts on what's happening now with Iran? As we speak, Secretary of State Pompeo has canceled a trip to Russia to go to Brussels to push European leaders on increasing the stranglehold, the isolation of Iran.
I mean, it's just, I have no words. I have no words to even begin to address the ridiculousness of this, you know, like that. I mean, of course, Iran has been a country that has historically stood against the U.S. because, I mean, in 1953, its democratic government was overthrown in a coup by the CIA, but to destroy, you know, one of the last countries which is standing in that region, to accuse it of having nuclear weapons when Israel has, you know, hundreds of nuclear weapons which no one is supposed to talk about. I mean, Iran, the Persians are just not going to be pushed over in this way, it is going to result in a kind of disaster that I don't think anybody can even imagine. So I would just say that everybody in the US, from the soldiers to the TV stations to the media to people on the street, should just beg their country or force their country or stop work to say, for their own sake, not for Iran's sake, for their own sake, not for some missionary altruistic reason, please don't do this.
Arundhati Roy, I want to thank you so much for spending this time. Arundhati Roy, the great writer whose brand new book, over 1,000 pages of essays over more than 2 decades, the last 2 decades, My Seditious Heart, will be out. And she is author of The God of Small Things, as well as The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, and a number of collection of essays. Thank you so much for being with us. To see part 1 of our conversation, the full Democracy Now! Show, go to
I love that Democracy Now! Has elevated her voice for many years. Like, this was 12 years ago. She's been talking about all of this shit for a very long time. Capitalism is a form of religion. She talks about religious nationalism being a sort of like psychosis, which I think is a great way to put that. Okay, this is Nawal El-Saadawi. She is an Egyptian revolutionary talking about feminism, fiction, and the illusion of democracy. I may actually speed this one up just so that we have enough time for the reading.
I'm delighted to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about the events in your life, because it's been a very full 86 years. How do you describe yourself?
Well, I describe a human being, a writer, yes, a dissident, a woman, a person who is trying to express herself truly and pay her life to say what she believes in.
Were you born rebellious? I mean, you say you're a dissident. Were you born saying no and not doing what you were told?
Yes, I think so. I think dissidence, part of it is genetic. My grandmother was revolutionary. She was a peasant woman in the village. She was illiterate, but she was revolutionary. So it was in her blood. So I took part of her genes in my blood, in my body. But part of it is also acquired through training, reading, traveling. So it's both ways, part genetic and part acquired.
In your autobiography,
it's an interesting
you
point.
talk about,
it's like we know trauma
as a very young girl,
inherited,
being aware of
generational trauma.
When I went to school when I was 6 years
revolutionary
old, so the teacher told me, write your name.
Can be inherited.
So I wrote Nawal.
It's a cool concept.
He said, no, write your full name. So I said Nawal Zainab. That's my mother, because she's the one who taught me how the alphabet. So I wrote Nawal Zainab. So he crossed the name of my mother very severely, very cruelly, and said, no, cross this name. Write the name of your father and grandfather, the father. At this moment, something illuminated. Why? Why my mother name is crossed? Why? Though she's the one who gave birth to me, who taught me how to read and write, everything.
And did you have that sense of injustice even then?
Yes,
I felt injustice.
I'll be right
it's
back.
Unfair. It's cruel, unfair. So I rebelled. From that moment, I started to feel that I am a dissident. I'm not going to accept that, not at all.
As you grew up, were women's rights, was feminism even something you were aware of?
No. Of course,
in the 1940s?
My father and mother were relatively liberal, not like other fathers, because at the age of 10, my cousins were married. And even they tried to marry me off when I was 10. But I rebelled against that because I loved education. I wanted to go to school. And my mother supported me and my father supported me a little bit. But the family was manipulated, wanting me to be married like all other girls. But they couldn't, because I rebelled and also my mother stood behind me, and because I was very good in school. So I continued my education and went to the medical school, to the medical college. But during that time, during the 30s, almost all the girls In my family, they married when they were very young.
What did you think of men when you were 10, 11, 12 and they were trying to
I
marry you
hated
off?
When I was very young, I hated them. I tell you why. Because my brother, who was older than me, 1 year, and he was not good in school. He was lazy. He was spoiled as a boy. So he didn't study well. He didn't work at home. So I studied well. I worked at home. And then he was rewarded by freedom. He went out as he wants. So I felt I hated him because he was having many privileges, just because he's a boy. So I was angry with him, and I was angry with God too, because my family said, that's what God said. He's a boy.
That was always the answer. It's God's will.
Yes, they didn't have an answer except that what God said, that he's a boy, he should have double what you have.
That's still what people say.
She's just going to stay
across the Middle East,
perched
isn't it?
here.
When you
Not
ask
the
them
Middle
anything.
East, all over the world.
Well, maybe all over the world.
All
but
over the world.
especially, I think, in Muslim countries, if you question
so.
anything and ask people, why is this happening? The answer you get often is, it's God's will.
It's God's. It's God, yes. But it's universal. It's because I lived in non-Muslim countries, Christian, Jewish, Hindu. They also speak about God all the time. Not in India. I lived in India some years, but not in India very much. But also people are oriented to say that God does everything. But yes, especially in our countries, God always there, interferes between the wife and the husband in the bed. God interfered in everything. So the first letter I wrote in my life was to God. Because I told him, yes, God, you are not just, and you treat me badly, and you treat my brother better than me, though I am much more intelligent than him. And this is not fair.
I love
and if you are not going to be fair,
Her first letter was to
I'm
God.
not ready to believe in you. As a child, I wrote that.
Dragging God.
And I think,
rightly
because
so.
after that I worked as a psychiatrist. I still do. But when I asked many women and men who came to my clinic about their childhood, they told me that's the same thing, that there was a conflict between them and God when they were young.
You said you see yourself, well, as a human being, but certainly as a dissident. You are seen by millions of women and millions of students as a feminist.
Yeah.
And as a
Fierce
feminist icon.
behavior.
Your writing has been studied for decades.
Yes.
At what point did you decide to write about the injustice of the patriarchy, as you saw it?
Well, I think all my life, even when I was a child. I have a book which I wrote when I was 13 years of age, because I had a diary, hidden diary, secret diary. Memoirs of a child called Suad. I published it about a child. So you see how I was very much against patriarchy. Because what is patriarchy? Patriarchy is this double standard, is this double morality, double law, is this that a man dominates you just because he's male and all that. So feminism is not something that I have to study. Girls become feminists without knowing what is feminism.
Yes, exactly. When you recognize the circumstances and you're like, oh, this sucks. Being socialized female, I am not listened to. I don't have as many opportunities. I'm paid less. Yeah, that's what happens. And it's also a colonial institution, patriarchy, because as we have seen that in many indigenous cultures, that there is a lot of diversity in gender. Like in India, for example, I identify as Hijra, which is a third gender, and this has largely been erased through more conservative movements, but also through British colonization, and how the current fascist Hindu nationalist state drew upon the oppressive aspects of colonization to continue oppressing the masses when there was independence from Britain, but not everyone received freedom with this independence from caste and colonial structures.
That's it. So I started writing about my problems of girls, of my sisters. The minute I hold the pen, I started writing about that.
Why were you writing? I mean, were you writing because you just had to express yourself, or because you wanted to change things?
In fact, to express myself. That's number one. I was not very aware of changing when I was young. I just want to pour myself outside, the anger outside, the fear outside, hostility outside, everything outside, to get it outside, to get rid of it. But after I grew up and after I studied in medicine and became aware, slowly I started to think that I want to change something. I want to change the whole world.
But what did you want to change?
Why I wanted to change? Because everywhere I go, there is injustice. It's a world full of injustices. Every step, at home, in the street, how boys treat me in the street. When I was a child, carrying my bag, going to school, male children in the street used to throw stones on my breast, you know, to throw me with stones, especially on my breast, because I'm a girl going out, you know. So I was furious. So I carried stones and I threw them. I was aggressive too. And when they found that I am as aggressive as them, they were afraid of me, you know. That's why I started to be dissident.
Defending
I felt
yourself.
That to be aggressive, to be dissident, to attack the people who attack me is good. I shouldn't submit. Because the boys were afraid and they ran away from me. They never stoned me after that.
So have you seen one of your jobs in life as being to change the world?
Yes, of course. Of course. Unconsciously, when I was a child, when I was a girl in secondary school, when I was in the medical college, I wanted to change the world, unconsciously. But after that, after I graduated, after I worked, I started to organize women. I started to understand the benefit of organization, that I cannot change the world alone. We must have a big organization. And those people who are organized should be aware of their rights. That's why I started writing seriously about women's rights. So it came gradual it came.
You had an organization for women?
We had an organization that was banned.
It was banned? And why do you think it was banned?
Why? The government banned it. Because when Sadat put me in prison, because my life went on like that my dissidence increased. The more I read, the more I live, I feel the injustice more and more.
What were you calling for? What was the aim of your organization?
Yep. The more you learn about the world, the more you are enraged
not just
by the state of the world.
Liberal feminism, no.
Ignorance really is bliss, but at what cost?
Socially,
your own oppression,
physically, religiously,
the oppression of other people.
So our feminism, we called ourselves historical. That's the slogan of our group: historical socialist feminist. Because we studied history and we understood that the oppression of women is not specific of Egypt or Arab people. It is historical. It is everywhere, in every country. Women were rebelling in all religions, in India, in Egypt, under Hinduism, under Judaism, under Christianity or Islam. Women were fighting for their rights. So we call ourselves historical. Feminism is not a Western invention. Feminism was not invented by American women, as many people think. No, feminism embedded in the culture and in the struggle of all women all over the world. So we call ourselves historical. And we call ourselves socialist because we are against class oppression.
Yep.
We are against capitalism because capitalism is linked to patriarchy. We are against
it's all
patriarchy,
connected.
not men. We are not against men. We are against patriarchy, the patriarchal system, the domination of men in religion, in economy, in culture, in everything, in science. That's why we call ourselves historical socialist feminists. And
this organization terrified the men in power, didn't it?
Terrified, yes, of course. It terrified them. That's why they banned it. And in fact, we were about to create a revolution because we had 40% men. We had 40, we were not all women.
Men were joining too?
We had 40% men and young men very enthusiastic about these points.
Why were they joining? Why were men joining?
Because they felt that men are oppressed by patriarchy too. That patriarchy oppresses both men and women, not only women. They understood, and I was writing about that. And they were also against class, against capitalism. And they loved very much the link between class oppression and women oppression. So this eliminated them. And many of them were socialists.
Are meant to
because
oppress
some
the
of them were
masses.
Marxists, because the Marxists did not join us. The Marxists did not join the Arab women because they said, no, women should not have a special organization. No, and women has no cause. Automatically, they will be liberated if we have communism. So we didn't agree to that. But the socialists, the young men socialists, who wanted to link the oppression of class, economic oppression, to women oppression, to gender oppression, and sexual oppression, they joined us.
Why were you not?
Which this goes to show as well how on the left, you know, there are disagreements as to how to find liberation, and how within these movements you can find people who are still perpetuating these larger systems of oppression and capitalism, where like you can still have like sexism exist within these movements, and how it really is about trying to find the people who you're willing to organize with, and making sure that you are trying to get as many people as possible, but they are aligned with your end goals as well. And it doesn't mean that like both of these movements weren't able to accomplish things in their own right as well.
The Marxist.
Why? Well, because I read Marx. Because many people who are Marxists never read Marx. Never. Because I read it. That's why I'm not Marxist. I'm not religious, because I studied religion. The more you study religion, you become non-religious. The more you study Marx, you become non-Marxist, because you know the defects.
I disagree with that.
And also the
I've read Marx.
And Marx himself was not a Marxist, you know. He was not a Marxist. And also I look to the life, the private life of the writer or the philosopher. Marx himself was very patriarchal, very patriarchal. Even he had an illegitimate child, and he didn't respect his woman. So I like integrity. I cannot believe in a philosopher that speaks about justice and then he treats his woman very cruelly, or does not recognize his child. You know, I do that. I do not separate between private life and public life.
When you look at women now, especially in Egypt and the Arab world,
not separating
do you think they are any more liberated than you were?
Like the art
Yes,
from the
of
artist.
course. A group of women and men who are liberated, you know, in the sense real liberation. And we have in the middle people who are trapped between being liberated and going backward. And we have the third group who go back. I will give example for women. For instance, in Egypt, you find in Egypt now women who are veiled completely, niqab, who follow the Salafi groups or the Muslim brother, and they are veiled, and they consider their self sex object for the man. He should own her and she should cover. And this is very retrograde, quite a big sector in society like that. Women.
Not just in Egypt. I mean, this is happening everywhere, isn't it?
Yes. That's why I do not separate between the local and the global. Yeah. We use now one word, glocal.
But many of them would argue with you when you say they see themselves as sex objects. They say, no, we wear this because it empowers us.
It empowers them.
That's what they argue.
How? But well, I discuss with them because they come to my clinic and they are sick because of this cover. Because nobody likes to cover the head. And why the head? You know. So there is a lot of hypocrisy. And also they are brainwashed. And also they are oppressed, so they don't want to confess that they are oppressed. It's a psychological problem. But still, some of them are convinced. I met some of them who say, well,
I mean, I think that
can
exist
can marry four
of
wives.
people being brainwashed by religion.
What do you think when
religion
when a woman
uses
says that?
these oppressive
If she agrees
structures?
that her husband can marry four wives,
also,
and then I
you can
ask her,
have
can your
people
husband allow you to have four husbands?
are
She said,
part
"Oh,
of
no."
religions
I
who
say, "Why?
are also for
Why do you
liberation.
accept to be just 1/4 of a woman in the life of your husband?
I think it's a bit different with Marx since it is analysis of factual conditions and their logical conclusions. I think if not Marx, then someone else would have arrived at a similar end. I agree. I think you can pull things from writers and philosophers and be like, oh, that is helpful. We can use this because it's actually helpful in providing structure for resistance. So you can somewhat separate Marx from his work slightly. Yeah, I think there is an argument for, like, you can take things that people are saying and understand as well that, like, humans are fallible and that people may also be perpetuating oppression in their personal life that, like, you have to acknowledge. It doesn't mean that, like, everything that they say needs to be discarded either.
And you do not allow yourself to have this right. And she starts to think, because they don't think. They are brainwashed. And because the fear of God, the fear of hellfire, she says, oh no, if I believe in that, I will go to hellfire. So I will go to hell and all that. And this is from childhood. And then we have the sector that is liberated, like my daughter, mind and body, but not Americanized. We have in the middle the women who are Americanized and Islamization with Americanization, that she covers her head, but she uncovers her belly, and she wears the blue jeans, very tight blue jeans, and then she covers her head. So this is the Americanization and the Islamization of women in our region. And it's going on like that.
Why do you think that's happening? And do you think those women, that group of women, and there are many women like that in Western countries.
Should be like the Dutch a few hundred years ago.
Where do you think they fit in the scale of liberation?
Prime Minister.
First of all, we live in one
honestly,
world. It's the market. It's capitalism. Women are, it's a commodity. Women are commodity. We are commodities, men and women.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's so interesting as well is that, like, she is speaking in Marxist terminology of saying that, like, women are viewed as commodities. That's overtly Marxist. But, I mean, what you're saying, Lapis, yeah, most of our politicians are these predacious pedophiles, and this is why we need revolution. And unfortunately, one of the biggest things that we are fighting in the US is this disillusionment with empowering the masses, this learned helplessness, the propagandizing of capitalism that is very imperialist at the heart of empire. It's really about, like, educating the masses so that they find their power. But we are seeing people resisting because, like, I wish it was as easy as, like, okay, we're just going to take out these politicians because they are protected in so many different ways. But the circumstances we are experiencing now are very similar to that of many revolutionary movements, like the French Revolution, which is something that we are talking about since we're reading the Scarlet Pimpernel, and it is aristocratic propaganda. I feel like you'd start a new pandemic if you ate that flesh. Yeah. Oh, I don't think anyone in the administration should be ingested. Like, especially like RFK Jr. He's like bathing in like literal cesspools and only eats meat and, what did he call it? Ferments. That fucker probably smells horrendous. But we are seeing more direct action that people are taking, which is important with organizing and lighting these warehouses on fire, where we are gaining more momentum in having a direct attack on capital, and that will have a more long-lasting effect in changing the system itself rather than this like continuing rotation of evil players that are replacing one another. So, yeah, I mean, it's bullshit what's happening in the US and what the US is doing abroad.
In this big market, capitalist market. So according to the capitalist market, women should be covered and uncovered.
But we need
to be covered because a lot of money will come from the veiling.
Also,
to be
some
uncovered
French
because a lot of money will come from nakedness.
Tactics.
You find that the society or the government or the media,
which is where things are leading,
and veiling. And in fact, nakedness and veiling are two faces of the same coin. It has the same message. Because when you veil a woman, you veil her. It means she is just a body to be covered. Because you don't veil a mind, you veil a body. When you make a body naked, it means she's a body. Because you don't make a mind naked or not naked. So this conception of women as just a body, a commodity for men, in the market, in the capitalist market, it will bring profit. You know, veiling of women brought a lot of profit to the market.
Yeah, it is interesting hearing her speak in very Marxist terms, of talking about capitalism, of commodifying human dignity, that she also has a different perspective of growing up in areas, I'm sure, where there is this conflation, or not even conflation, this integration of religion and the government, and how these forces work together to oppress the masses, but especially to oppress and further marginalized people who are already marginalized.
Capitalism and nakedness of women and their makeup, everything, all that.
Speed it up a little bit. I wanted to get to more of the part where she's talking about the illusion of democracy.
The postmodern woman, it brings a lot of profit to the market. So you see how women are used in the market by religion or by modernism or postmodernism.
And are other women complicit in this?
Yes. You mean that the mother oppresses her daughter? Oh, yes.
And other women?
Yes, but usually slaves. This is slave mentality, slave psychology. Usually slaves hate each other and fight each other to please the master. They want to please the master. So women want to please the man, the master. And that's why they oppress their girls or they oppress women.
I think that perspective is also ignoring the fact that it's like, if people are enslaved, like in this example that she's talking about, it's not because there is this desire to do that, but people are, like, the definition of oppression is lack of choices, that people are forced into circumstances. And that when you have people who are oppressed and marginalized, there are many who can think that if they align with oppressors, that they then get buy-in and acceptance to these systems, when in actuality, they will never be accepted. And so, like, drawing this back to the US, like, people are extremely propagandized and they're also in cults, like this MAGA cult, where there are some people breaking away, but there are other people that will justify whatever Donald Trump does. And like, him dying, like, we'll see what happens with that, like, if that will make it so they aren't cultists anymore, but I doubt it. They'll probably turn to some other demagogue. And how there is this larger project of deprogramming people that we need to be looking out for, especially with these younger people that have been in the manosphere and such, where there is this idea of like, oh, if I'm a trad wife, then I will find acceptance and I won't have a hard time. And it's like, well, you're also choosing a different form of oppression. Okay. I think I'm actually going to stop that there. And then read a little bit of Rousseau. And then get into the Scarlet Pimpernel. Okay. So I wear these gloves because I have sweaty hands and I don't like ruining my books. So there you go. With Rousseau, we are reading his essay, The Origins of Inequality. And he has this idea of indigenous people having the ideal society, but also speaking about indigenous people in very condescending white supremacist terms. So, like, we have to acknowledge him really needing to decolonize his own mind while he is advocating supposedly for human equality. That there is hypocrisy there, but that his words did inspire a lot of revolutionary action, not only for the French Revolution, but for other revolutionary movements. Okay. So where we left off, I know that many of the powerful, or the associations of the weak, wait, no, I skipped a line. I know that many have imputed another origin to political sciences, such as the conquest of the powerful, or the associations of the weak. It is indeed no matter which of these causes we adopt in regard to what I would establish. That which I have just laid down, however, appears to me the most natural for the following reasons. Firstly, because in the first case, the right of conquest being no right in itself, it could not serve as foundation on which to build another. The victor and the vanquished ever remaining with respect to each other in a state of war, unless the vanquished being restored to the full possession of their liberty, they should voluntarily make choice of the victor for their chief. Yeah, so talking about that example of like, unless people have full liberty, that they are forced into, a lot of the time, this illusion of choice by choosing their oppressors. For till then, whatever truce or capitulation may have been made between them, as such capitulations were founded in violence, and of course ipso facto void, there could not have subsisted in this hypothesis either a real society or body politic, or any other law than that of the strongest. Secondly, because these words strong and weak are in the second case ambiguous, for during the interval between the establishment of a right of property, or prior occupancy, and that of political government, the intent of these words is better expressed by the terms rich and poor, because in fact, before the institutions of laws, men had no other way to reduce their equals to submission than by invading their property or by parting with some of their own property to them. So you can see how this was a precursor to Marxism. This is my book, my version of the Communist Manifesto, other revolutionary writings, talking about property, the acquisition of things, and having domination over land and objects to then, therefore, have domination over other people and the larger system of society. Thirdly, because the poor, having nothing but their freedom to lose, it would have been the highest degree absurd in them to resign voluntarily the only blessing they enjoyed, without receiving any compensation for it. Whereas the rich, being sensible, if I may so express myself, in every part of their possessions, it was much easier to do them a mischief, and therefore more necessary for them to guard against it. Yeah, so like the more you have to lose. And in short, because it is more reasonable to suppose anything to have been invented by a person to whom it could be of service, rather than by one to whom it must have proved prejudicial. Government had in its infancy no regular and constant form, the want of a competent fund of experience and philosophy preventing mankind from seeing any but present inconveniences. They thought not of providing against the future till they presented themselves. In spite of the endeavors of their wisest legislators, the political state remained imperfect, as we're talking about electoral politics, that it is not just about having this rotation of bad actors, but rather addressing the system itself. The political state remained imperfect because it was little more than the work of chance, and being ill begun, work of chance, I don't necessarily agree with that. Though time sufficiently discovered its mistakes, it could never remove its original defects. The work of reparation was constantly repeating, instead of the area being cleared and the old materials removed. It, as was done by Lycurgus at Sparta, to erect a solid and lasting edifice. So, yeah, of like shifting around pieces of the system rather than changing the system itself. Civil society consisted at first merely of a few general terms of convention, which every member bound himself to observe, and for his performance of covenants, the whole body became security to the respective individuals. Experience only could show the weakness of such a constitution, and how easily it might be infringed with impunity, from the difficulty of being convicted of faults, in which the public alone were to be both witness and judge. Hence the laws could not fail of being variously eluded. Disorders and inconveniences could not fail of being multiplied, till it became at length necessary to commit the dangerous trust of public authority to the hands of private persons, and the care of enforcing obedience to the deliberations of the people to the magistrate. Yeah, where it's like, okay, so then when people acquire all of this money and power, that they then are able to dictate what happens, rather than people having control over what their leaders do. For to pretend that chiefs were chosen before social confederacies were formed, and that the administrators of the laws subsisted before the laws themselves, is a supposition too absurd to merit a serious confutation. It would be as little reasonable to suppose that mankind at first threw themselves at the feet of an absolute master, without making any conditions with him, or that the first expedient which proud and uncivilized men, see the colonizer language, should hit upon for their common security, was to run precipitately into slavery. For what reason, in fact, to run into slavery, as if it's not, like, actively pursued by oppressors? For what reason, in fact, did they take to themselves superiors at all, if it was not in order that they might by their means be defended from oppression, and protected in their lives, liberties, and properties, which are in a manner the constitutional elements of their being? Now, in the relations between individuals, the worst that can happen to one man being to find himself subjected to another, so like non-consensual domination, it would have been inconsistent with common sense to commence by bestowing on a chief the only things which they wanted his assistance to preserve. What equivalent was it in his power to offer them in return for so ample a grant? And if he had presumed to exact it under pretense of defending them, would he not have received the answer recorded in the fable? What can we grant more to the enemy? It is therefore beyond dispute, and indeed a fundamental maxim in politics, that people have preferred chiefs to protect, not to enslave them. If we have a prince, said Pliny to Trajan, it is in order that he may prevent our having a master. So essentially, he's talking about how people, under the illusion of saying, like, no, we want liberty, that there is this misconception, or I guess not misconception, this delusion that if we are asking the people in charge to say, oh, please protect us, please give us freedom, that we are giving up our freedom in order for them to control it. Politicians are guilty of the same sophistry in regard to the love of liberty, yes, that's true, as philosophers are in respect to a state of nature. They judge by what they see of things very different, which they have not seen, imputing to man a natural propensity to servitude, because the slaves within their observation are seen to bear the yoke without impatience, without reflecting that the case of liberty is the same with that of innocence or virtue. The value is not known except by those who possess them, and that a taste for them is forfeited when they are forfeited themselves. I know the charms of your country, said Brasidas to a satrape, who was comparing the manner of life at Sparta with that of Persepolis, but it is out of your power to taste the pleasures of mine. Yeah, so it's kind of reiterating that same concept of talking about how the people in power are the only ones who actually know what liberty is. And I mean, they can still be subject to oppression as well because they're existing within a system, but that they are the ones who only know what it is, and so they therefore understand what people are missing out on and have a vested interest in propagandizing people, making it so that people accept their oppression, that people are not resisting, that people are much more easily controlled if they are willingly accepting their circumstances. An unbroken horse erects his mane, paws the ground, and starts back at the sight of the bridle, while that which is properly trained suffers patiently even the whip and spur. So savage man bends not his neck to that yoke, again, savage, which it's talking about, like, original man, of, like, without these colonizing, oppressive societal structures, to which civilized man submits without murmuring, but prefers the most turbulent state of liberty to the most peaceful slavery. It is not, therefore, from the servility of nations already enslaved, that we must form our judgment of the natural dispositions of mankind, either for or against slavery, but rather from the prodigious efforts of every free people to prevent oppression. I am sensible that the former are perpetually declaiming in praise of that tranquility they enjoy in their chains, and that they call a state of wretched servitude a state of peace. Miramam servituda pacem appellant, which is Latin. But when I observe the latter sacrificing pleasure, peace, wealth, power, and even life itself to the preservation of that only treasure which is so much disdained by those who have lost it, when I see free-born animals dash their brains out against the bars of their cage, out of an innate impatience of captivity, when I behold numbers of naked savages, see, again, that despise European pleasures, braving hunger, fire, the sword, and even death itself to preserve their independency, I feel that it belongs not to slaves to argue about liberty. So in this particular instance, he's talking about slaves to a system of like slave in your mentality, not in like the owning of another human being. But he's using that language to say that when a government or when these political forces, these societies that are oppressive have effectively captured the minds of people, that people act as slaves. We're seeing this with MAGA, as we were just talking about, how these people are the biggest proponents for their own oppression, how they feel that if they are stepping on the necks of other people, that if they have slightly better circumstances than other people, that they then feel comfortable in their oppression. Okay, so now that we have some of that under our belt, let's get to the Scarlet Pimpernel. So I started on chapter 8. This is Marguerite. She recently just said goodbye to her brother. He set sail to go to France, and he's a Republican, meaning that he is, or they both are, they're on the side of the people who are starting this revolution, but both of them are a little uncomfortable with what they refer to as the excesses of violence when it is a natural product of the very violent, decades-long, centuries-long oppression that people were experiencing. And then she ran into Chauvelin. He is someone that she knew in France, and she's very excited to see him, but he seems to have some ulterior motives. So just to be clear, this is aristocratic propaganda written by Baroness Orsi, who is also a fascist sympathizer at the beginning of the Third Reich, and that she largely came up with the idea for this book because the people who were working on her father's land originally were trying to negotiate better working circumstances, and he refused to do this, that he instead wanted to industrialize and displace them from their jobs, and so then they defaced his property. And so now the Baroness is like, oh, that's so evil, these people. It's like, yeah, that was property. Who cares? You have like multiple estates. So we're looking at this through a Marxist lens, just to make that clear. Where did I leave off? Okay. Have you heard of the Scarlet Pimpernel, citoyenne Saint-Just? Asked Chauvelin abruptly. Heard of the Scarlet Pimpernel? She retorted, with a long and merry laugh. Faith, man, we talk of nothing else. We have hats à la Scarlet Pimpernel. Our horses are called Scarlet Pimpernel. At the Prince of Wales' supper party the other night, we had a soufflé à la Scarlet Pimpernel. Lud, she added gaily. The other day I ordered at my milliner's a blue dress trimmed with green, and bless me if she did not call that à la Scarlet Pimpernel. So this also is talking about how it's trying to portray the English as all being extremely royalist during the French Revolution, but clearly there is a separation of class and where their sympathies lie, whether they are for revolutionaries or against. So naturally, the aristocracy, they were royalists and were like, oh, the horror of what's happening. And the common people are like, yeah, that makes sense. But it's trying to paint with a broad brush this idea that all of England was against the revolution, which was not the case. And the few people it does show of being against the revolution, it shows them as being like pretentious and like self-righteous, which is also this kind of cynical framing of people who were actually trying to support human rights. Chauvelin had not moved while she prattled merrily along. He did not even attempt to stop her when her musical voice and her childlike laugh went echoing through the still evening air. But he remained serious and earnest whilst she laughed, and his voice, clear, incisive, and hard, was not raised above his breath as he said, "Then, as you have heard of the enigmatical personage, citoyenne, you must also have guessed and known that the man who hides his identity under the strange pseudonym is the most bitter enemy of our republic, of France, of men like Armand Saint-Just." "La," she said with a quaint little sigh, "I dare swear he is. France has many bitter enemies these days." "But you, citoyenne, are a daughter of France, and should be ready to help her in a moment of deadly peril." "My brother Armand devotes his life to France," she retorted proudly. "As for me, I can do nothing, here in England." "Yes, you," he urged still more earnestly, whilst his thin, fox-like face seemed suddenly to have grown impressive and full of dignity. See, again, like he's this conniving person. It's like, yeah, the working class has to be smart about how they are resisting. "Here in England, citoyenne, you alone can help us. Listen, I have been sent over here by the Republican government as its representative. I present my credentials to Mr. Pitt in London tomorrow. One of my duties here is to find out all about this League of the Scarlet Pimpernel, which has become a standing menace to France, since it is pledged to help our cursed aristocrats, traitors to their country, and enemies of the people." Well, yes. "To escape from the just punishment which they deserve. You know as well as I do, citoyenne, that once they are over here, those French émigrés try to rouse public feeling against the Republic. They are ready to join issue with any enemy bold enough to attack France. Now, within the last month, scores of these émigrés, some only suspected of treason, others actually condemned by the Tribunal of Public Safety, have succeeded in crossing the Channel. Their escape in each instance was planned, organized, and effected by this society of young English jackanapes, headed by a man whose brain seems as resourceful as his identity is mysterious. All the most strenuous efforts on the part of my spies have failed to discover who he is, whilst the others are the hands, he is the head, who, beneath this strange anonymity, calmly works at the destruction of France. I mean to strike at that head, and for this I want your help. Through him, afterwards, I can reach the rest of the gang. He is a young buck in English society, of that I feel sure. Find that man for me, citoyenne," he urged. "Find him for France." Seems like a good cause, but in this story, he's viewed as a villain. Marguerite listened to Chauvelin's impassioned speech without uttering a word, scarce making a movement, hardly daring to breathe. She had told him before that this mysterious hero of romance was the talk of the smart set to which she belonged. Smart set, which means like the noble classes. Already, before this, her heart and her imagination had been stirred by the thought of the brave man who, unknown to fame, had rescued hundreds of lives from a terrible, often unmerciful fate. Is it? I don't know. She had but little real sympathy with those haughty French aristocrats, insolent in their pride of caste, actually describing it as caste once again, which is an accurate depiction, of whom the Comtesse de Tournay de Basserive was so typical an example. But Republican and liberal-minded though she was from principle, she hated and loathed the methods which the young Republic had chosen for establishing itself. She had not been in Paris for some months. The horrors and bloodshed of the Reign of Terror, culminating in the September massacres, had only come across the Channel to her as a faint echo. We have a footnote here. If I can turn the page with my bloody gloves. Okay. These massacres occurred in early September 1792, just weeks after the overthrow of the monarchy, when mass hysteria and suspicion was at its height. Fears of a Prussian invasion in support of the royalists unleashed a flood of fear and hatred that manifested itself as unbridled violence against prisoners and other convenient enemies. So you can also tell as well that, like, the person who is editing this, the scholar who is helping to provide the introduction and these footnotes, is more sympathetic to the ruling class. The Committee of General Surveillance incited hatred as revolutionary journalists such as Jean-Paul Marat and Louis-Marie Fréron cried for revenge. This atmosphere of generalized fear finally degenerated into mob violence on Rue de Bussy on September 3rd, as prisoners who were being transferred to the prison de l'Abbaye were murdered in the street. The crowd then made its way to prisons throughout the city, where it continued its slaughter without intervention from the authorities. Yeah, because that's what happens when mobs have had enough. The massacre continued for 4 days. Dragged out of their cells, prisoners would appear before an improvised public tribunal, in which they were perfunctorily condemned and delivered to the justice of the mob. Which is maybe one of the truest ways to get justice, is by having a mob exact it. The number of victims in Paris had been estimated to be between 1,300 and 1,400, and there were similar instances of massacres in Orléans, Versailles, Meaux, and Rheims. Okay. Robespierre, Danton, Marat. She had not known in their new guise of bloody judiciaries, merciless wielders of the guillotine. Hey, we have another footnote. Marat, born into a modest family in Switzerland in 1743, Jean-Paul Marat was trained as a doctor and a veterinarian. He became a journalist and a prominent and influential voice of the French Revolution. He advocated dictatorship in order to ensure the revolution's success. Yeah, that's not great. We don't like that. Marat's extremist writings contributed to fueling public fervor before the September massacres, and along with Georges Danton and Maximilien de Robespierre, he embodied the dictatorship of the extremist group known as the Montagnards. He was assassinated by a member of the conservative Girardin faction, Charlotte Corday, and honored with a national burial. His gravestone reads, "Here lies Marat, the friend of the people, assassinated by the enemies of the people on July 13th, 1793. So he's like, we're going to replace a king with another king, essentially. Her very soul recoiled in horror from these excesses, to which she feared her brother Armand, moderate Republican as he was, might become one day the Holocaust. Okay. Because there are enough nobles to actually have that be a possibility. It's just like a complete misinterpretation of what the word Holocaust even means. Then, when she heard of this young band of English enthusiasts who, for sheer love of their fellow men, dragged women and children, old and young men, from a horrible death, her heart had glowed with pride for them. And now as Chauvelin spoke, her very soul went out to the gallant and mysterious leader of the reckless little band, who risked his life daily, who gave it freely and without ostentation for the sake of humanity. For the sake of whose humanity, right? So talking about how he's doing it for sheer love of their fellow men. No, these aristocrats have a vested interest in saving the lives of fellow aristocrats, that they are protecting their own, protecting themselves, and that they have an interest in squashing this revolution and rebellion because they don't want the same thing to happen to them. So it is deeply self-interested. Her eyes were moist when Chauvelin had finished speaking. The lace at her bosom rose and fell with quick, excited breathing. Wow. She no longer heard the noise of drinking from the inn. She did not heed her husband's voice or his inane laugh. Her thoughts had gone wandering in search of the mysterious hero. Ah, there was a man she might have loved. Had he come her way? Everything in him appealed to her romantic imagination. His personality, his strength, his bravery, the loyalty of those who served under him in the same noble cause, and above all, that anonymity which crowned him as if with a halo of romantic glory. Find him for France, citoyenne. Chauvelin's voice rose to her ear. Close to her ear, roused her from her dreams. The mysterious hero had vanished, and not 20 yards away with her, a man was drinking and laughing, to whom she had sworn faith and loyalty. La, man, she said with a return of her assumed flippancy, you are astonishing. Where in the world am I to look for him? You go everywhere, citoyenne, whispered Chauvelin, insinuatingly. Lady Blakeney is the pivot of social London, so I am told. You see everything, you hear everything. Easy, my friend, retorted Marguerite, drawing herself up to her full height and looking down with a slight thought of contempt on the small, thin figure before her, as he's trying to, fight for the liberation of his people. Easy. You seem to forget that there are 6 feet of Sir Percy Blakeney and a long line of ancestors to stand between Lady Blakeney and such a thing as you propose. For the sake of France, citoyenne, reiterated Chauvelin earnestly. Tush, man, you talk nonsense anyway, for even if you did not know who this Scarlet Pimpernel is, you could do nothing to him. An Englishman? I'd take my chance of that, said Chauvelin, with a dry, rasping little laugh. Yeah, as you should. At any rate, we could send him to the guillotine first to cool his ardor. Then, when there is a diplomatic fuss about it, we can apologize, humbly, to the British government, and if necessary, pay compensation to the bereaved family. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. What you propose is horrible, Chauvelin, she said, drawing away from his as from some noisome insect. From his, I'm guessing that's a typo, drawing away from him as from some noisome insect. Whoever the man may be, he is brave and noble, and never, do you hear me, never would I lend a hand to such villainy. You prefer to be insulted by every French aristocrat who comes to this country? Chauvelin had taken sure aim when he shot this tiny shaft. Marguerite's fresh young cheeks became a thought more pale, and she bit her underlip, for which she would not let him see that the shaft had struck home. That is beside the question, she said at last with indifference. I can defend myself, but I refuse to do any dirty work for you, or for France. You have other means at your disposal. You must use them, my friend. And without another look at Chauvelin, Marguerite Blakeney turned her back on him and walked straight into the inn. That is not your last word, citoyenne, said Chauvelin, as a flood of light from the passage illumined her elegant, richly clad figure. We meet in London, I hope. We meet in London, she said, speaking over her shoulder at him, but that is my last word. She threw open the coffee-room door and disappeared from his view, but he remained under the porch for a moment or two, taking a pinch of snuff. He had received a rebuke and a snub, but his shrewd, fox-like face looked neither abashed nor disappointed. On the contrary, a curious smile, half sarcastic and wholly satisfied, played around the corners of his thin lips. So we see her reject trying to find out who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, and how she now has become even more loyal to the royalists. Okay, I think we have time for one more chapter. This is chapter 9, The Outrage. A beautiful starlit night had followed on the day of incessant rain, a cool, balmy, late summer's night, essentially English in its suggestion of moisture and scent of wet earth and dripping leaves. The magnificent coach, drawn by 4 of the finest thoroughbreds in England, had driven off along the London road, with Sir Percy Blakeney on the box, holding the reins in his slender, feminine hands. Same. And beside him, Lady Blakeney wrapped in costly furs. A 50-mile drive on a starlit summer night. Marguerite had hailed the notion of it with delight. Sir Percy was an enthusiastic whip. His 4 thoroughbreds, which had been sent down to Dover a couple of days before, were just sufficiently fresh and restive to add zest to the expedition. Marguerite reveled in anticipation of the few hours of solitude. With the soft night breeze fanning her cheeks, she thought wandering whither away. With her thoughts wandering whither away. She knew from old experience that Sir Percy would speak little, if at all. He had often driven her on his beautiful coach for hours at night, from point to point, without making more than 1 or 2 casual remarks upon the weather or the state of the roads. He was very fond of driving by night, and she had very quickly adopted his fancy. As she sat next to him hour after hour, admiring the dexterous, certain way in which he handled the reins, she's like, "Oh, how you use your hands." Okay. She often wondered what went on in that slow-going head of his. He never told her, and she had never cared to ask. At the Fisherman's Rest, Mr. Jellyband was going the round, putting out the lights. His bar customers had all gone, but upstairs in the snug little bedrooms, Mr. Jellyband had quite a few important guests, the Comtesse de Tournay with Suzanne and the Vicomte, and there were 2 more bedrooms ready for Sir Andrew Ffoulke and Lord Anthony Dewhurst, if the 2 young men should elect to honor the ancient hostelry hostelry and stay the night. Wow. Tripping over some things. For the moment, these 2 young gallants were comfortably installed in the coffee room before the huge log fire, which, in spite of the mildness of the evening, had been allowed to burn merrily. "I say, Jelly, has everyone gone?" asked Lord Tony, as the worthy landlord still busied himself, clearing away glasses and mugs.
"Everyone as you see, my lord."
"And all your servants gone to bed?"
"All except the boy on duty in the bar, and,"
added Mr. Jellyband with a laugh,
"I expect he'll be asleep before long, the rascal."
"Then can we talk here undisturbed for half an hour?"
"At your service, my lord. I'll leave your candles on the dresser, and your rooms are quite ready. I sleep at the top of the house myself, but if your lordship will only call out loudly enough, I dare say I shall hear."
"All right, Jelly. And, I say, put the lamp out. The fire'll give us all the light we need, and we don't want to attract the passer-by."
"All right, my lord."
Mr. Jellyband did as he was bid. He turned out the quaint old lamp that hung from the raftered ceiling, and blew out all the candles. "Let us have a bottle of wine, Jelly," suggested Sir Andrew.
"All right, sir."
Jellyband went off to fetch the wine. The room now was quite dark, save for the circle of ruddy and fitful light formed by the brightly blazing logs in the hearth.
"Is that all, gentlemen?"
asked Jellyband, as he returned with a bottle of wine and a couple of glasses, which he placed on the table.
"That'll do nicely, thanks, Jelly," said Lord Tony. "Good night, my lord. Good night, sir."
"Good night, Jelly." The 2 young men listened, whilst the heavy tread of Mr. Jellyband was heard echoing along the passage and staircase. Presently, even that sound died out, and the whole of the Fisherman's Rest seemed wrapped in sleep, save the 2 young men drinking in silence beside the hearth. For a while, no sound was heard, even in the coffee room, save the ticking of the old grandfather's clock and the crackling of the burning wood.
"All right again this time, folks.
Or folk," added Lord Antony at last. Sir Andrew had been dreaming evidently, gazing into the fire and seeing therein, no doubt, a pretty, piquant face with large brown eyes and a wealth of dark curls round a childish forehead. "Yes," he said, still musing. "All right."
"No hitch?"
"None." Lord Antony laughed pleasantly as he poured himself out another glass of wine.
"I need not ask, I suppose, whether you found the journey pleasant this time?"
"No, friend, you need not ask," replied Sir Andrew gaily. "It was all right." I have a tickle in my throat. Okay.
Then here's to her very good health, said jovial Lord Tony. She's a bonny lass, though she is a French one. And here's to your courtship. May it flourish and prosper exceedingly. He drained his glass to the last drop, then joined his friend beside the hearth.
Well, you'll be doing the journey next, Tony, I expect, said Sir Andrew, rousing himself from his meditations. You and Hastings, certainly, and I hope you may have as pleasant a task as I had, and as charming a travelling companion. You have no idea, Tony.
No, I haven't, interrupted his friend pleasantly, but I'll take your word for it. And now, he added, whilst a sudden earnestness crept over his jovial young face, how about business?
The two young men drew their chairs closer together, and instinctively, though they were alone, their voices sank to a whisper. I saw the Scarlet Pimpernel alone for a few moments in Calais, said Sir Andrew, a day or two ago. He crossed over to England 2 days before we did. He had escorted the party all the way from Paris, dressed, you'll never credit it, as an old market woman, and driving, until they were safely out of the city, the covered cart under which the Comtesse de Tournay, Mademoiselle Suzanne, and the Vicomte lay concealed among the turnips and cabbages. They themselves, of course, never suspected who their driver was. He drove them right through a line of soldiery and a yelling mob, who were screaming, "À bas les aristos!" Down with the aristos. But the market cart got through along with some others, and the Scarlet Pimpernel in shawl, petticoat, and hood yelled, "À bas les aristos!" louder than anybody. Faith! Added the young man, as his eyes glowed with enthusiasm for the beloved leader. That man's a marvel. His cheek is preposterous, I vow, and that's what carries him through. Lord Antony, whose vocabulary was more limited than that of his friend, could only find an oath or two with which to show his admiration for his leader. He wants you and Hastings to meet him at Calais, said Sir Andrew more quietly, and on the 2nd of the next month, let me see, that will be next Wednesday. Yes, it is, of course, the case of the Comte de Tournay, this time a dangerous task for the Comte, whose escape from his chateau, after he had been declared a suspect by the Committee of Public Safety, was a masterpiece of the Scarlet Pimpernel's ingenuity, is now under sentence of death. It will be rare sport to get him out of France, and you will have a narrow escape if you get through it all. Saint Just has actually gone to meet him. Of course, no one suspects Saint Just as yet, but after that, to get them both out of the country? I' faith, 'twill be a tough job and tax even the ingenuity of our chief. I hope I may yet have orders to be of the party. So it's implying that Armand, Marguerite's brother, he's actually working for the Scarlet Pimpernel, the royalists. And he's going undercover.
Have you any special instructions for me?
Yes, rather more precise ones than usual. It appears that the Republican government have sent an accredited agent over to England, a man named Chauvelin, who is said to be terribly bitter against our League and determined to discover the identity of our leader, so that he may have him kidnapped the next time he attempts to set foot in France. This Chauvelin has brought a whole army of spies with him, and until the chief has sampled the lot, he thinks we should meet as seldom as possible on the business of the League, and on no account should we talk to each other in public places for a time. When he wants to speak to us, he will contrive to let us know. The two young men were both bending over the fire, for the blaze had died down, and only a red glow from the dying embers cast a lurid light on a narrow semicircle in front of the hearth. The rest of the room lay buried in complete gloom. Sir Andrew had taken a pocketbook from his pocket and drawn therefrom a paper, which he unfolded, and together they tried to read it by the dim red firelight. So intent were they upon this, so wrapped up in the cause, the business they had so much at heart, so precious was this document which came from the very hand of their adored leader, that they had eyes and ears only for that. They lost count of the sounds around them, of the dropping of the crisp ash from the grate, of the monotonous ticking of the clock, of the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of something on the floor close beside them. A figure had emerged from under one of the benches. With snake-like, noiseless movements, it crept closer and closer to the young men. Not breathing, only gliding along the floor in the inky blackness of the room. "You are to read these instructions and commit them to memory," said Sir Andrew, "then destroy them." He was about to replace the letter case in his pocket when a tiny slip of paper fluttered from it and fell onto the floor. Lord Antony stooped and picked it up. "What's that?" he asked. "I don't know," replied Sir Andrew. "It dropped out of your pocket just now. It certainly did not seem to be with the other paper." "Strange. I wonder when it got there. It is from the chief," he added, glancing at the paper. Both stooped to try and decipher this last tiny scrap of paper on which a few words had been hastily scrawled, when suddenly a slight noise attracted their attention, which seemed to come from the passage beyond. "What's that?" they said both instinctively. Lord Antony crossed the room towards the door, which he threw open quickly, and suddenly, at that very moment, he received a stunning blow between the eyes, which threw him back violently into the room. Simultaneously, the crouching, snake-like figure in the gloom had jumped up and hurled itself behind upon the unsuspecting Sir Andrew, felling him to the ground. All this occurred within the short space of 2 or 3 seconds, and before either Lord Antony or Sir Andrew had time or chance to utter a cry or to make the faintest struggle, they were each seized by 2 men. A muffler was quickly tied around the mouth of each, and they were pinioned to one another back to back, their arms, hands, and legs securely fastened. One man had, in the meanwhile, quietly shut the door. He wore a mask and now stood motionless, while the others completed their work.
"All safe, citoyen,"
said one of the men, as he took a final survey of the bonds which secured the 2 men.
"Good," replied the man at the door. "Now search their pockets, and give me all the papers you find."
This was promptly and quietly done. The masked man, having taken possession of all the papers, listened for a moment or two if there were any sound within the fisherman's rest. Evidently satisfied that this dastardly outrage had remained unheard, he once more opened the door and pointed peremptorily down the passage. The 4 men lifted Sir Andrew and Lord Antony from the ground, and as quietly, as noiselessly as they had come, they bore the 2 pinioned young gallants out of the inn and along the Dover road into the gloom beyond. In the coffee room, the masked leader of this daring attempt was quickly glancing through the stolen papers.
"Not a bad day's work, on the whole,"
he muttered as he quietly took off his mask, and his pale, fox-like eyes glittered in the glow of the fire.
"Not a bad day's work."
So it's Chauvelin. He opened 1 or 2 more letters from Sir Andrew Folk's pocketbook, noted the tiny scrap of paper which the 2 young men had only just had time to read, but one letter, specially signed Armand Saint-Just, seemed to give him strange satisfaction.
"Armand Saint-Just, a traitor after all," he murmured. "Now, fair Marguerite Blegany," he added viciously between his clenched teeth, "I think that you will help me find the Scarlet Pimpernel."
Okay. That is the end of chapter 9. These are pretty short chapters. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to do Banned Book Club. We're reading chapters 18 and 19 of The Giver, if you are interested in joining. We will discuss the reading, the symbolism of the reading, why the book is banned. And also, I want to finish some of the videos that I didn't get to finish today. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you for being here. It was good chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. And I will see you soon. Okay, bye.